Good afternoon. I will call the regular meeting of the Kentucky Board of Education to order. Welcome to our members, to those in the audience, and all viewing the meeting remotely. To members attending virtually, please ensure your video is streaming and that you are seen throughout the duration of our meeting. Sam, please call the roll.
Holly Bloodworth.
Here.
Harold McKinney.
Here.
Justin Pate.
Here.
Julie Pyle.
Here.
Randy Poe.
Here.
Sharon Porter Robinson.
Here.
Lee Todd.
Here.
Steve Trimble.
Here.
Diane Woods.
Here.
Lou Young.
Here.
Lawrence McCroby.
Here.
Preston Graham.
Here.
Secretary Jamie Link.
Here.
And President Aaron Thompson. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Included on today's board agenda is a dedicated public comment segment. This segment is limited to 10 speakers at a maximum of 3 minutes each. We do not have any speakers lined up to offer comments at this time, so we will move to internal board business, which is an action discussion item. You will find in the portal a summary of minutes for the March 22nd, 2025 regular meeting day 1, March 27th, 2025 KBE regular meeting day 2, May 29, 2025 KBE Awards Committee meeting. We have distributed those to you in advance. Are there any corrections to any of these minutes? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion regarding their approval. Is there such a motion? Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thanks so much. All in favor of approving these minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I do thank you for that vote. Kentucky is very fortunate to have both an active teacher and current student serve on the State Board of Education. On tomorrow's agenda, we will have the opportunity to celebrate the contributions to our current teacher member, Dr. Lawrence McCroby, and our current student member, Preston Graham, as they conclude their terms of service at the end of the month. 701 KAR 5160 requires that the KBE select a non-voting student and non-voting teacher member no later than its last regular meeting of the fiscal year. The selected members will serve a one-year term, which will begin July 1 and will conclude on June 30, 2026. Following an application period as outlined in 701 KAR 5160, special committees of the Commissioner's Student Advisory Council and the Commissioner's Teacher Advisory Council were invited to review the applications and recommend finalists to the Kentucky Board of Education. The finalist applications were distributed to board members in advance of today's meeting to review and for their review and consideration. The Teacher Advisory Council identified 3 non-voting teacher position finalists, with candidate number 2 as the recommended top candidate. The Commissioner recommends the selection of teacher candidate number 2. At this moment, I would ask the board for a motion to approve the selection of teacher candidate number 2 to serve as the 2025-26 non-voting KBE member. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you so much. Is there a second? Second. Very good. Further discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor of the selection of teacher candidate number 2, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. The Student Advisory Council Special Committee identified 3 non-voting student position finalists. It has since been determined that the application for candidate number 1 is ineligible based on requirements outlined in 701 KAR 5160. The Student Advisory Council Committee recommended 2 other applications which were shared with you in advance. I would ask that the board review and discuss the 2 applications and then move to approve one applicant as the 2025-26 KBE non-voting student member. Please remember, no candidate can be referred to by name, so please use the application number 2 or 3 in discussion and do not share any confidential information. Once the top candidate is determined, a vote will be necessary. So at this moment, I will ask you to go to the portal and review candidates number 2 and 3. And I would open the floor for board members to offer comments regarding these 2 candidates. Comments?
I just wanted to make a comment that on student applicant number 3, that particular individual is, I've actually got to work with in the course of traveling and doing what I do in my area. And that particular individual, I couldn't recommend any higher or any better than what I'm sure some of her references have said. They are a well-versed, well-rounded, well-spoken individual. And I think the student position would benefit highly and greatly from that individual.
Thank you very much. Other comments?
I
Please,
was not
Holly.
able to open parts of the application.
The letter of recommendation, I wasn't
Or
either.
their resume.
Yeah,
I
if
tried to
you
look
open-
at them at home and I
Yeah.
couldn't see all parts of their
Same.
application.
Can't see them now. You open?
I don't need it.
Yeah, thank you. The thought occurs to me that I'm going to ask that we give board members a little more time to come back to this on tomorrow's agenda. And we will, if you will allow me, we will table this action and schedule it for tomorrow's agenda. Thank you very much.
Someone
We are
will
not
fix it.
ready to,
Someone will fix it so we can open them, because we can't open up the
Show us how to
applications.
open it.
yes. In the interim, we will make sure that everybody has access to that information, those materials.
And I don't
so
think
that-
this is a confidentiality problem, but they're both from the same school. They're not, okay. I was having trouble following. Okay, thank you.
Applicants 2 and 3 are not from the same school.
Okay.
It's, I really do want to, even given this little glitch, some of it technology and all of that, I want to say in advance of formally recognizing our student and teacher members. Each and every year, we have found the board deliberations richer, our communications more informed, and really improved given the perspective of these 2 board members. So this is taken quite seriously, and we have come to have very high expectations regarding their jumping into the pool feet first and getting to work with us shoulder to shoulder, and we've never been disappointed. So we fully expect that tradition to continue. The next item of business concerns renewal of our membership in the National Association of State Boards of Education. In the portal, members were provided with a document from NASB outlining member benefits, and several members have participated in NASB opportunities, including our student and teacher members.
Yes.
I would entertain a motion from the board to renew the KBE's membership with NASB for the upcoming year. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Julie? Okay.
Second.
Was that- We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
I would just add how much I have personally appreciated the opportunity to engage with NASB, and I'm really proud that this board continues to be a part of that organization. The programming and support services are always outstanding.
Any other comment?
I'll just say the articles they send out are very rich and detailed also.
Thank you. Julie?
The white papers, the work being part of the high school transformation. As a new board member, I found that very valuable in helping me to get up to speed. So, and the conferences have been fantastic.
And Ms. Powell served on the executive board last year.
It has been amazing the extent to which KBE members have been so engaged, participate, and we will be really diligent about making sure you're aware of those opportunities. And I want to say that having worked in national organizations, Kentucky's level of engagement with its national organization, this board is truly very active, and therefore we get called on. Yes, Diane?
I would just like to say, because I went to a conference that NASB sponsored, and it was probably one of the best things that I've done in a long time as far as professional development and working with other colleagues across the state. And the respect that they have for Kentucky is amazing. For the work that we do here, that we're always kind of on the cutting edge, and that we have put students first in everything that we do. So I would second that advocate, just what Ms. Powell has said about NASB, and that I hope that this board would continue to keep its membership. I think it's very valuable. We get a whole lot more out of it than we pay, believe me.
Agreed.
Well, on that note, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of renewing our NASB membership, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much. Carries unanimously. We will re-up. The next item concerns KBE member out-of-state travel approval. Per our policy manual, all out-of-state travel for which reimbursement is sought shall be approved in advance by the board, by the Finance Committee through the KDE. Vice Chair Lou Young requests approval to attend the 2025 Southern Regional Education Board Making Schools Work Conference next month in New Orleans. I would ask the board to offer a motion and then to approve that motion regarding Dr. Young's out-of-state travel. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion?
No, thank you so much for the motion and second. I would just add that I've been invited to present at the conference, and our presentation was accepted, and we'll be presenting on Kentucky United We Learn with Knowledge Works.
Any further questions? All in favor of the motion to approve this out-of-state travel, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Motion carries. Appointment of KBE Awards Committee. As per our policy, the KBE Chair, with the approval of the board, shall name members and chairs of all committees. I've asked Julie Powell to serve as Chair of the KBE Awards Committee, and she has agreed. I would now entertain a motion to approve Julie Powell's appointment as Chair of the KBE Awards Committee. Is there a motion to that?
Make the motion.
Randy, thank you so much. Is there a second?
Second.
Steve. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No further discussion was needed. Thank you so much, Julie, for offering to serve in that regard. We now come to the recipient of the 2025 Grissom Award for Innovation in Special Education. Current chair of the awards committee, Diane Woods, will make this presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The late Dr. Johnny Grissom served at the Kentucky Department of Education in the role of Associate Commissioner for the Office of Special Instructional Services. She provided steadfast commitment, service, and leadership, striving to help all students, achieve at high levels regardless of their disabilities. Each year, the Kentucky Board of Education grants the award to a Kentuckian or a Kentucky organization to honor outstanding dedication to improving achievement for students with disabilities. The criteria for receiving the award include leadership or implementation of innovative practice in curriculum, instruction, or assessment that leads to improved learning, post-secondary or workforce outcomes for students with learning or behavior differences, and districts or schools demonstrating significant improvement or sustained excellence in learning or behavior outcomes for students with learning or behavior differences. On behalf of the awards committee, I would like to share that the committee met on Thursday, May 29, and determined that candidates 19 and 22 best met the criteria for the award. Therefore, I would like to move approval of candidates 19 and 22 as the recipient of the 2025 Grissom Award for Innovation in Special Education, and ask the chair for the board's approval to recognize candidates 19 and 22 at the board's upcoming August regular meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Diane. And on behalf of the committee, I want to thank you for the amazing work that you've done. You've had competitive deliberations all this year, and we've been able to recognize some amazing work throughout the state. But coming from the committee, this motion does not need a second. I would ask all those in favor of adopting the committee recommendation to approve candidates 19 and 22 as the recipients of the 2025 Grissom Award for Innovation in Special Education. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We look forward to meeting those candidates at the August meeting and recognizing them publicly at that time.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, if I may, Ms. Pyle and I want to thank Chair Woods for her service, leading us with a very steady hand in the awards committee process. There's no one who is more diligent in the effort to ensure that that is a process with integrity, and it's been our pleasure to work with her. Look forward to Julie taking over there as well. And I want to put a plug in at Retreat. We're going to be asking for a couple new members to our team. It's a really rewarding process, I promise. So be thinking about it.
So I want to underscore the comments and observation that Lou offered regarding the contribution of Diane Woods to the awards process and other aspects of our business. But also in the August meeting, we're going to ask that you think with us about our committees, the structure of them, the purpose of them. And I have to say, the awards committee, though, is one that has constant work to do. We have recognition opportunities that are really, well, I don't want to scare anybody away, but I do want to. I want to say we have to take this seriously.
Yes.
We do.
Because we're recognizing our colleagues and across the state who are doing amazing things, and they deserve to be celebrated. We are fortunate to be able to know them and to call on them to help us in our work. And so there is no such thing as an insignificant opportunity to serve when you're working on this board. So I appreciate it so much. And Diane, you've been amazing. You've set a high standard, but each time we kind of,
We learn and
those
we move,
standards
we
and
learn and
take
we
it
move
forward.
on.
yeah.
We use what our skill set to do the best job that we can with the task that's before us. And lay down at night and know that we did our best. Because there's no losers in these applicants.
No,
It
exactly.
makes it very difficult to separate who's going to get the award and who isn't, because they're all so deserving.
And it's so inspiring just to
It
read
is.
all of the applications.
Well, that's the thing that I've noticed. Each time we have presented the awards personally, it's an inspiration story. So really a blessing. So thank you so much. Now, board, I'm going to ask that we look at the consent agenda, which is quite lengthy. As a reminder, this item does require a vote, but it consists of motions and actions that we can make all at once. But these items have been identified in the, as by the staff as non-controversial and routine in nature. Consent items F through WW are requests for certification of the noted administrative regulations to avoid their expiration. All these regulations are currently in effect and nearing the 7-year expiration date. Staff have reviewed these regulations and determined they should be certified to remain in effect. If the regulations are not certified, they will expire and become ineffective. At this time, does any member wish to have a consent agenda item moved to the regular discussion action item? Seeing no interest in removing an item from the consent agenda, I would ask the board to entertain a motion to approve all items on the consent agenda. Is there such a motion?
I move.
Thank you, Holly. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jessica. We have a motion and a second. I will call the question. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Thank you so much. The consent agenda is approved. We will now go to our review items. First, we have the Kentucky United We Learn and Accountability Framework. We will ask Commissioner Fletcher to join the table with Jennifer Staffer to review the Kentucky United We Learn Assessment and Accountability Framework 4.0.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and we appreciate the opportunity to bring back the comments that we've had from our LSAC after our last board meeting. There was a, thank you for that. There was a recommendation as part of the motion in the last board meeting, and then we were also asked to take this back to LSAC and to SCAC, our
School Curriculum Assessment
you.
Accountability Council.
affectionately known as SCAC. But also, too, before we do that, I want to take an opportunity to thank Vice Chair Young and also Board Member Woods for being at our meeting yesterday with IJCE, the Interim Joint Committee on Education, to talk about the accountability model. We thank you for your support, and I've had so many others that have watched this online, too. So thank you for being a part of that presentation yesterday. I'd also like to thank Dr. Stafford, who did a great job answering the tough questions that the rest of us could not. We presented, and then we also had Dr. Brian Kreisman, who did a phenomenal job to talk about the work in Fleming County, and also Dr. Jesse Bacon, who talked about the great work going on in Bullock County. And their focus was to talk about local accountability as part of the model. So again, it was a great presentation yesterday, a lot of positive feedback, and look forward to where we are now. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Stafford as we move forward.
Thank you. It was 1 year ago, last week, that we pushed out the first prototype of our reimagined assessment and accountability systems. Throughout 2024, we developed 4 prototypes, and into 25, we have now 4 frameworks. Thanks to your guidance, the input from the Kentucky United We Learn Council, as well as the local superintendent advisory council, we've gotten to where we are today. And so if we'll go to the next slide. So during that time frame, we had an iterative process that brought forward many suggestions from our stakeholders. We had surveys, we had lots of input, including town halls. We went through a series of town halls in January and February to receive input from our stakeholders on Framework 4.0. The last time that we met as a board, you asked for specific changes to 3.0, which we went back and we made those changes and took those changes to our SCAC, our School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council, as well as LSAC. Those 2 particular changes included, the first was to change the graphic in the framework that it has 2 distinct features. The one on local accountability remains the same. The one on the right-hand side of the graphic said during 3.0, federal accountability.
You do have this slide deck in your portal until they're able to put it on the screen. So.
Thank you, Dr. Young. The graphic also has on the right hand of that graphic it said federal accountability, and the change was requested by you to have it say state accountability that meets federal requirements. That change was made along with the change to the technical document that includes the writing and social studies. In 3.0, it had grades 3 through 10 that it would be administered an option to include in the local accountability system the testing from social studies and writing at grades 3 through 10. That was reduced to once per grade band per your request. So those 2 changes were made in both the technical document as well as the framework itself. We took those 2 changes to LSAC to SCAC on May 6th, and they were very supportive of the framework. There were just a couple of clarifying questions that they had, along with some other comments that included concerns that the local accountability from district to district may not be comparable, which that's a reason for local accountability is that the districts would have flexibility and that autonomy to make their own local accountability systems, as well as some other suggestions around expanding testing to 9th grade specifically. We brought the comments also to LSAC, and they were supportive. They had no feedback from the changes from 3.0 to 4.0. So those were the changes that you requested, as well as the feedback from our 2 governor-appointed committees.
You're doing great, but he's bringing you the slides.
Oh, that's good.
You're crushing it. Crushing it. You haven't talked about the phases yet.
Yes. So the framework does not change the 3 main goals. remains still to enhance and encourage vibrant learning experiences in all of our districts to provide innovation, especially when it comes to assessment and accountability, and to provide and encourage collaboration among communities with that. So the framework, again, remains the same, and the phased-in approach, again, districts are at different places where they are in this work. And so realizing that, supporting our districts where they are. Some of our districts, as Commissioner said, we had Fleming County and Bullitt County representatives yesterday that was sharing their journey around how they are developing their local systems that were quite in different places. Although they have the journey started, where they are is different. And so realizing that we have to support our districts who are deeply involved in the work and those that have not started in the work. So,
And I'll add to that. Thank you, Dr. Stafford. For example, Bullitt County that presented yesterday, they've done a lot of work as it relates to Profile of a Learner and the work that they've implemented at that point. They're in their second year at looking at a local accountability model. If you're really and truly going to engage your community, this takes time. And this takes a lot of specific, detailed work to work with our local businesses, with your local faith leaders, your teachers, your students, to make sure that you are addressing, you're also meeting the needs of your community. With Bullitt County in particular, they came up with 6 different pillars, and these pillars were developed by their local accountability team. So when we talk about you just can't flip a switch and hope that everyone's at the same spot. So we do have our L3 districts that would be great for their pilot phase. We've had some other districts to ask to be a part of this pilot phase already. We had one to contact us this morning, said if this moves forward, they would love to be a part of the pilot phase. But then 2, it's so important to have that expansion. How do we grow from and connect people? I've said this several times. One of my favorite slides when it comes to the town halls that we did back in January and February came from Woodford County again.
From Heath's district.
From Heath's district, yes. Mr. Graham's district, Preston's district. Sorry, inside joke there. But what Woodford County, when they talked about, they went through with some great pictures of vibrant learning that was going on within their community. They went through a lot of work and they talked about the processes. But one of the slides also showed the logos of various districts that they were working with. And again, I even did this yesterday. I have a picture of a map of Kentucky in my head. So they have collaborated with Logan County, Shelby County, Rowan County, Johnson County, Clark County, I think Kenton County, and others. And I think even Rockcastle may have been part of their collaboration also too. And don't quote me on that one, but from what I remember, they were scattered all over the Commonwealth to get input. And that's what the expansion phase needs to look like. How do we connect people? How do we network districts to say, this is what a local accountability model that we've developed at this point, how do we grow together? And of course, that also adds into the sustainability portion. So if you look at the sustainability phase, in order to have that, you have to have that shared vision, that shared learning. You have to have people collaborating together to make this happen. And then also, too, having that review system, where a district, right now, something that we've talked a little bit about that we're going to see in July, OCIS, the Office of Continuous Importance Improvement, and the Division of Innovation is working on essentially a toolkit on how districts can implement their own local accountability system. So that's also a part of this expansion sustainability. But again, a huge part of this is not going to happen in the fall. If it's approved as is by the legislature in January, it's going to take time to build this across our districts. So again, that is the last page of the overall accountability model, how to expand that. So again, are there any questions or anything we can add for our board members?
Well, board members, I'm going to encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to look at the video of yesterday's presentation to the interim joint committee, you would benefit from seeing it. You would see a lot of information presented in a way that was amazingly engaging to the members of the General Assembly. And you would see the guest superintendent who joined the commissioner in that presentation step up to take responsibility for how the community must become aware of the barriers to learning that students within their community encounter. And then it becomes the community's responsibility to address those barriers. And even as a policy wonk, I fully suspect that the community's address of those barriers will be much faster and more effective than depending on policy. So it's a way of seeing how unleashing the power of accountability produces immediate benefits to the students once the community becomes aware of their existence and their power to address those barriers.
And that discussion was specifically around kiddos that come
from poverty situation. It was amazing to see and most beneficial. So, Julie, please weigh in.
Just a quick comment, because I've been watching a number of the school districts as they evolve, and I think something that these districts are, this is a constantly evolving system. It's not going to be at one point in time. Because I think with what Dr. Kreisman has seen, he's had a number of itinerations also, but it's involved the community feedback. And so you start creating this energy cycle. This is the basis of it that just keeps going and flowing and making things better and better for a continuous improvement system.
And I'd like to emphasize, if I may, Chair, the continuous improvement process. You know, one of the things that was emphasized yesterday is, yes, we want to improve when it comes to our math, reading, our science, and making sure our students are meeting grade level standards and beyond. But we also want to give the opportunity within our local accountability model, to, not only the opportunity, but the requirement of how do you grow. We've talked about, for example, I think Dr. Kreisman had mentioned in several meetings I've been in with him, how they've started off, they want to keep this accountability model now for 3 years. You know, they've gone through, I think, 4.0. I think this is their fourth model that they've looked at. So they'd like to keep the same model, but to keep that input for after 3 years, what do we need to change? And how have we grown because of it? So again, to see that emphasis on, for example, if there's barriers to learning, how does your improvement plan line up to that, to addressing those barriers? So it was really, to listen to have the two superintendents there as part of that was just as exciting as the town hall meetings of having the districts. And I thought that was really great.
Randy?
Yeah, it's not as much questions as it is clarification, and the commissioner and I have talked about this beforehand, so it's not surprising. But I do want to clarify, or have you clarify, because there's been differences of opinion coming out of KDE on some of this stuff, and we want to make sure that it's clarified here. The one thing that, and this is more, I guess, into the weeds than the overall general introduction that we just had. So I just want to make clear that when we're talking about interim assessments there, that we're looking at 2026, looking potentially for an RFP for our pilot phase, study phase. But eventually from that 2026 that we talked about at the last time, we're going to be asking the legislature to pay for those interim assessments. School districts could have a choice not to choose that, but they would have to pay for it. But there's also critical language in there, I think, that needs to be clarified, because it says that the interim must have the same level of instructional information that's given out in the state interim assessments that would come out. So there could be, I guess, a list from KDE that says these ones provide that same information, or how are we going to address the interim assessments if an interim assessment that a district is using does not provide the same information that the RFP does?
So again, going back to that, as far as clarification, a district could choose to keep their own, first and foremost. So if they are comfortable with the level of instructional data, the level of information that they're getting to help with their MTSS, they can continue with that. But it'd be our goal is to have those, to have the interim assessments align with the summative assessment as closely as possible. Especially on grade, well, it would be on grade level standards, but we want that same level of information. So in our RFP, we would ask for, these bullets, these are the type of information that needs to be addressed. So that would be what we'd ask for in our RFP to say, we want that same level of instructional data, the instructional information that districts are already getting with what they have now. And we'd have to ask districts, what exactly are you looking for? So that's what we do in our RFP.
Yeah, because going back to when it was Munis and IC, that was the same wording, and we have that same wording now. But if it didn't meet that standard to give the exact information, then it was mandated. So that's, it gets down in the future, the person interpreting this later, that may be or may not be the same people at this table.
Well,
So I think that's a clarification. It's important. It's kind of questioned out there.
Sure. The question, there would be at no point are we mandating any district to take the state interims.
But it says the wording does say, if you look at the wording that's in your technical document, it says it must have that information the same.
And I think and maybe we need to clarify this, what we're talking about is in the state interim assessments, we'd want the same level of data that districts are getting already with what they already have. We're not saying that the districts have to have the same level of data the same level of information that we offer. We're saying that we have to have the minimum of what they're offering. I think that's how I would interpret it.
It talks about growth. There's two measurements that you talk about. But there could be a question of how a different product determines the growth and the grade level performance. That if I'm reporting 70, because that's in the state accountability portion, not the local. So if I'm reporting 70% on grade level and somebody else is at 60%, but the calculation, if they're using a different mechanism, isn't going to be consistent across the board, technically.
So the question concerns really comparability across various instruments.
Correct.
And to what would we resort in order to determine comparability and alignment
Because it also says that if you use the state one on an RFP, you don't have to do the interim assessment in the spring because obviously that's going to be the state assessment. But if I'm a district using my own assessment, I still have to use the state final assessment, regardless if I'm using another system. I just want this clarified for people that's out in there listening who hasn't been following everything.
And so looking at the technical document, I do think you clarified for me there, Dr. Fletcher, it is that the state will provide interim assessments aligned to the summative and must be aligned to grade level standards, K-10, measuring grade level equivalency and student growth. On the district one, it says districts will have the option to include interim assessment results within their local accountability system. So the RFP question is for the state assessment only.
Yes.
Okay.
But clarifying that if I use a separate system, I still have to use the state summative assessment in the spring.
Yes,
regardless of what I used up to
Yes,
this
sir.
point in time.
Absolutely.
And that will not be paid for. I think that's been clear. The other one that, let me see here. Okay, the other question I had last meeting for this, and it's not been, I guess, clarified. We're going to still have, from a testing standpoint, a different system for K-3 than we do for 310, because it's legislated, I guess, is what I've been told by the Kentucky, or the Learning Department. So are we still looking at hopefully aligning so that we actually have a K-12 system? Because I think, when we're looking at this, to have measurements for literacy and numeracy at K-3 or K-2, I don't even know what it does because it's going to overlap because you're going to have an assessment for 3 here and doesn't the other one cover K-3? So third graders are going to have 2 different types of assessment. They're going to be assessed on math and literacy one way here, and then assessed a different way over here. Are we looking at getting that together? Because I think that should have been part of the conversation that people don't understand it. They say, well, this is, coming out of KDE, this is legislated. Well, accountability and assessment is legislated too.
Sure.
The legislators could come back and say, notwithstanding this others, that KDE or we should be asking for a K-12 alignment somewhere in the process instead of having two separate ones, so that I'm out in the field K-3. My third graders are going to be doing this for this assessment, and my third graders are going to be doing this for that assessment, and they're not aligned yet. Hopefully, I'm just saying, and I know you're not doing that in this document, but I think that has to be the future, the vision of getting this all aligned, because right now we're only aligning a portion of it.
And you're absolutely right. That is the vision, to align all of this K through 10. And the reason for that is we don't want to add testing. We want to actually try our best to reduce the footprint of state testing in
Correct.
particular. So some of the discussions we're having with OTL and also in OAA is, can we align that K through?
Can we say those offices, because I
I'm
think
sorry,
that
Office of
confuses
Teaching and Learning,
people out there.
the Office of Teaching and Learning, and the Office of Assessment and Accountability. To have those two groups, we're having those discussions, is can we align that K through 10 so that if you look at as a part of the Reads to Succeed and also the numeracy counts, what's required in that in K through 3 is that universal screener and the diagnostics that are a part of that. We would like, if we can at all, that's the goal, that's the vision, is to align that work all the way through. Because one of the things that was mentioned in GREC, it would be great to have a system, K through 10, that is one aligned system from the state level. So that would be the vision, and we're still having discussions on that. That would be what we'd look for in our RFP moving forward. That is the goal. So we're trying to see how we can work through that. So yes, we want to make sure, if we can at all, if we look at the requirements under numeracy counts and also under the Reads to Succeed, we want those diagnostics and also those universal screeners to align in this pathway. So it's one system. That's our goal. And we'll keep you up to date as we learn more as we go through.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that you guys did from the last session to this. I think it's so much better in relationship to local accountability that we've talked about. We just want to make sure that if we give local accountability, that we then don't come back from the state and take that local accountability away because we don't like something that they're using one way or the other. And I think that's the key of some of that particular language. And one last thing, because it is relative to here, but even more to a discussion maybe tomorrow. But my concern is on social studies still, that it's been 2 or 3 years that the standards has been in flux, and we still don't have the total standards. How's a local district going to create a local assessment in relationship to state standards that has not been, I don't think they've been approved yet in social studies, have they? Or am I misinterpreting that? Mickey's back there trying to give you. They're in law, but.
Be effective.
Yeah.
So social studies actually had to undergo a review because of 158.196 to add the
Right.
24 documents. So those have now been approved and are in law, and that's what current school districts should be utilizing and implementing K-12. So those are in existence. That's a document incorporated by reference. So any sort of local assessment should and could align to the current social studies standards. Those will begin another round of review, to your point, Dr. Poe, coming up in the near future. But it's about a 2-year process for us to complete a full standards review.
Okay,
So
so
the
what,
current model will look at the existing standards.
so I'm that current superintendent sitting out there. What should, if I'm developing my own local, because nobody kind of, well, I mean, there's a big question mark still around those standards that are there, that some agree with them, a lot do not agree with them because they include this or don't include that, and that's not for me to make a decision. But, so you're saying that they should use whatever you're
Current
saying there
standards,
for the
yes.
record, for them, that's what they should be using.
Absolutely. And this may be my bias, but I think if, and Dr. Stafford, you would have to speak to this more, but I think the current model for the social studies test is absolutely aligned to what we are wanting students to experience in terms of vibrant experience in social studies, where they're looking at different passages and thinking about different problems of practice in the realm of social studies. And so I think there's much possibility for local leaders to consider what that can look like in a very meaningful way at the local level.
So if I'm that superintendent, and there's parts of the social studies that we feel that's lacking in national, there's that debate out there, as you well know. So if I want to include that in my local part, I can include that in my local part by taking the state part.
Yes.
So if I want the War of 1812 in there, then I can teach it and say, this is what X knows and compare it to X, Y, and Z.
Absolutely.
Can I have the students take the state test and not necessarily report those because we're adding other things, or how's that going to work from the social studies test from a local accountability? I'm just asking. These are technical, I know, but these are things people want to know about.
Sure. In 4.0 right now, in the change that you made to 4.0 was that the schools had the option to opt into the social studies assessment at once per grade band. So they can opt into the state, or they could develop their own local competency-based, more authentic type of demonstration of their students' knowledge and skills.
I guess my question is a little bit further than that. Can I opt in to take the state portion of the social studies and still give a local option and then come up with my score? Or am I destined to do my own total assessment? Because I still want to compare myself to somebody else, but I also want to make sure that they know these other standards.
I'll answer that. I say yes.
There's
And,
yes.
and it'd be very similar.
Local
I agree.
accountability, yeah.
And you could do the same thing with summative reading and mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have your reading and mathematics, that
Yeah.
we're still pulling that out for CSI, TSI, and reporting that separately. You know, like a lot of our districts put together a pillar that includes their own local assessments along with the state assessments to report that in local accountability. So if they want to present a model that includes both, they can. It's just putting them both together.
Okay,
So yes.
that's great.
I think a harder question might be, if you do opt in for the state social studies, can you not report it? So I'm not even sure that we've worked out that level of granularity, but in terms of what would happen in a local accountability, social studies, performance-based assessment would yield a lot of different kind of important information than what you might get in the state formal standardized assessment. So the question would become, can I take it and not report it? I mean, those are the kinds of details that we will absolutely have to flesh out. Frequently asked questions might be helpful, Jennifer, if we're not already collecting those in that way. But I really appreciate, Randy, you're asking the coherence questions around Read to Succeed, numeracy counts, et cetera, because as you pointed out, these are required in other statutes beyond assessment and accountability. But one of the challenges, and really what I think one of the greatest potentials of where we are in the moonshot process, is that this team has the opportunity to bring coherence under Jennifer and Mickey to say, let's look across all of this. Let's measure time on testing. Let's think about a comprehensive approach, even if it's not just the moonshot model. And what does that mean for districts? And I think one of the things that I've seen Mickey and her team do most recently in social studies and language arts world languages, for example, is working with professional associations in the state to say to teachers, this is a catalyzing opportunity for you as the social studies experts in the classrooms across Kentucky to come together and talk about how you might collaborate on a performance assessment system in social studies that could be replicated across schools and districts as the leadership sees fit. So I'm excited about the unleashing the power of teacher leadership around social studies and science in particular.
Other comments? We have just a few more minutes. And I do want to say, I hope we will continue to dig into the various aspects of this framework from the perspective of all the important people who will depend on it, including community leaders and also including students, to really understand how we can make this serve their needs for information to support their learning. This is not about making headlines. This is about informing practice, informing what we do to support students on the way to achieving their mastery of the curriculum objectives and standards in our curriculum. So thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Stephanie, for this really, Jennifer. I saw something. I did a Dr. Fletcher.
That's
Pardon me,
right.
Jennifer. Appreciate that and appreciate your being with the team yesterday.
Where would we
Yes.
access the video of yesterday's?
It's Kate. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting.
Really good session.
I saw members of the General Assembly just being kind of it was like, wow. And it was all based on what's happening in communities all across the state.
If I may, Chair Robinson?
Yes, please.
I thought another beautiful thing that happened yesterday, you had legislators adding to the conversations of what was happening in districts that
Yes.
they've witnessed.
Yeah.
So I thought that was something that was so important because they were able to give their own examples of what they're seeing in their own districts. And maybe in some counties versus other counties, they're seeing a little bit. But I thought that was amazing to say, we talk about local accountability to be a collaborative effort. I think that shows that our local accountability models are being implemented, are being a collaborative effort even with our legislators, which is very important.
The Dr. Seuss book, "All the Places You Will Go." I mean, we said we were going to the moon. Let's look at our strategic planning update right now. So we'll ask Chief Performance Officer Karen Dodd and KDE Strategic Analyst Abigail Jacob to provide us with an update. Thank you, Karen.
Absolutely.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon.
To approve the document before it went forward.
Okay. With me today is my data analyst, Abby Jacob, and we are going to walk through the customer service survey that we recently administered. So I'm going to start off with just a little bit of background on this survey. You can go to the, thank you, next slide. This survey was administered in March of this year. Typically, we do this in February, but this year, the AP auditors were doing a very similar survey, and so we held off a month to do this one. I want to give you a little bit of background just so that you know that we've been doing this survey since about 2012. We started it with a survey that is out of the Baldrige Institute. It is their Are We Making Progress survey. Julie's well familiar with it. And so it is definitely a well-known survey. It is valid and reliable. We've taken that survey, though, and customized it a little bit for our organization. One of the things that we did was to break it into two different surveys. So we have this customer survey, and we are currently administering our employee survey, which also comes from that Baldrige Are We Making Progress survey. Let's see. So if you can go on to the next slide, just to let you know who took the survey. We send this out to superintendents, and we ask them to share it with their central office. In the past, we've also asked them to share it with schools in their district, and what we found is that we end up getting a lot of folks who take the survey and then tell us that they never have any contact with KDE. Pardon me. So we added a qualifying question into the survey that asks them first, do you work directly with KDE? And if they, or how often do you? And if they say never, it thanks them for their time and takes them out of the survey. If they work with us at all, then they go on to complete the rest of the survey. So as you can see, this year, we have mostly superintendents and district administrators who took the survey. That makes up 84% of those who took the survey this year. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit more of a breakdown of the different role groups who took the survey. not just this year, but going back to 2021. Most notably, you can see the totals there have gone down quite a bit over time. Part of that is, I think, because of the qualifier that we put in there. And this year, we did not ask them to send it to schools because we felt like we were not getting the right folks doing it. That was probably a mistake. I made that call. I own that. We will next year, in talking with our leadership team, go back to asking them to forward it on to schools and districts. We also will talk with our advisory groups. We have a teacher advisory group. We have a principal advisory group. We have dozens of advisory groups. And so we will also follow up with them so that we can get those numbers back up there. I don't expect it'll get up to close to that 4,000 range again. That was in 21, and that was right after the pandemic. We did not survey in 2020. There was just so much going on with the pandemic, but in 2021, people wanted to share what they were experiencing throughout that pandemic, and that was what we saw a lot in that survey. And you can see it's kind of gone off from there, but this is definitely the lowest that we've been. So I do want to acknowledge that and that we will work to get that up next time. On the next slide, this just shows for those who said that they do work with us in any capacity, the offices that they say that they work with at least some of the time. So we see primarily the highest would be out of the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support, and the lowest, probably a good thing, Office of Legal Services. So keeping us out of trouble. So that just allows us, by collecting that data, it allows us to do a little bit more internally with looking at some of those results by office. You can go to the next slide. And so the great news here is our overall progress. So even though those numbers were low, the responses that we got were truly, truly excellent. In each of the domain areas, and we have 3, leadership, communication, and service, you can see since 2018, we have made significant improvement, particularly this year. Leadership being a huge jump. So we are over 4.01 in that leadership. This is on a 5-point scale. And I know Dr. Fletcher doesn't want me to say this, but I did share with him that it matters. Leadership at the top matters. And some of these questions do pertain to what is happening right now, the visibility that we have, particularly around the work of the Cool Council, the work of assessment and accountability, and just having our leadership team out there. We saw lots of comments about how appreciative folks are with Dr. Fletcher getting out there and truly listening, and that is coming through in these numbers. But you can also see that service and communication have also taken a steep increase, which we're really excited about. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abby, and she's going to talk a little bit about each of the domains.
Good afternoon. So first, we'll go through the questions that were asked in the leadership domain of the survey. Next slide, please. So as you'll see on this slide, we have high percentages of agreement on all the questions in the leadership domain. The blue and the dark blue indicates the percentage of respondents who indicated that they agree or strongly agree with the statements shown. So you can see that the highest percentage of agreement are in KDE demonstrates integrity, with over 80% of respondents agreeing or strongly agreeing, as well as KDE sets high expectations for educators and school leaders in the Commonwealth, and KDE actively seeks opportunities to collaborate, and continuing down the list, high levels of agreement with all of the statements in this domain. Next slide, please. So this slide breaks up the percentage of agreement by role group of the respondents. Now, for the case of this survey, any role groups with less than 10 respondents, such as teachers, principals, and student support staff and other, are merged into the all other staff category in order to preserve anonymity of responses. But you can see here, superintendents and district administrators, over 3/4 of both of those role groups agree or strongly agree with all the questions in this domain, and over 80% of all other staff. Next slide, please. So moving on to the communication domain. Next slide, please. So as you can see in the communication domain, again, strong percentage of agreement on all the questions here, particularly with over 90% agreement with the statement KDE communicates in a professional manner. High levels of agreement with KDE highlights good work in Kentucky schools. KDE communicates important information in a timely manner, and KDE values feedback from schools and districts. Next slide, please. So moving on to our role groups, as you can see, over 70% of the respondents in all three role groups, superintendents, district administrators, and all other staff, over 70% overall agree with the statements in the communications domain. Next slide, please. So moving on to our service domain. Next slide, please. As you can see, continuing on the pattern that we've seen in all of our other domain, still high levels of agreement, particularly under KDE staff are courteous with almost 90% of agreement. I understand the United We Learn vision. KDE supports the work that I do, and service provided by KDE meets the needs of districts, schools, and students. Moving on.
If I can pause there for a minute, Abby. One of the other things that we've started doing is a pulse check survey. So at the bottom of our emails that go out, there's a little link to go to a survey. We don't do this all the time. I think it is currently being administered on the bottom of our surveys. But we ask just 2 questions. How satisfied are you with the support you receive from KDE? And the KDE staff member was courteous and professional. And so looking at the data that you see here and this data, we want to make sure that we're seeing something similar. And so as of right now, because this survey is currently being administered, right now we have about 265 respondents, and this started in April. So April, May, and June is when this one is being administered. And as of right now, 265 responses, 92% are satisfied or very satisfied with the support they receive from KDE. And then as far as courteous and professional, 97% said that the staff member that they spoke with was courteous or professional. So I just wanted to show that, we're looking at this from several different angles to make sure that it's not just one vehicle that we're depending on.
Thank you, Karen. So if you'll move on to the next slide, we have, again, breaking down our service questions by role group. And again, still high levels of agreement on all of these questions. Over 68% of superintendents and almost 65% of district administrators, as well as 78% of all other staff. And now Karen will give you an update on how this survey reflects our strategic plan goals.
So we've gone through our strategic plan with you, and we have in our operations section of the strategic plan several goals that are impacted by this survey. So one of them is, you can go to the next slide. This one is around customer satisfaction. So again, we have more than one source for this information, but on this slide you can see that we are looking at 2 questions out of the customer survey. I know who to contact to get information, and KDE values feedback. Those are 2 questions where we have traditionally scored rather low or lower than the other questions on here. So we combined those 2 questions, the results of those, to create an index that we want to start from. So the average of those 2 questions was 56, and so we wanted to move up 10 points over the next 5 years. As you can see on this slide, our goal was to get to 58 for this year, and we are at 71, which already exceeds our goal over the 5 years. We haven't even implemented our strategies yet for the improvements that we wanted to make in this one. So we're going to continue because we want to see this continue to go up, and if we can get far beyond that goal, we're more than pleased with that. But we're excited that it's already starting to show some improvement before we've even really started working on that. On the next slide, you'll see another goal that we have to improve the average favorable agreement of the KDE leadership domain in the customer satisfaction survey. Here, we started off at 64%, looking to get to 76% over 5 years. Our goal for this year was to get to 64, and we are at 65. So we are on track to meet our projections over the next 5 years so far. Abby will talk about the open-ended questions that we had in the survey.
Yes, so we ask, at the end of the survey, we ask respondents if they would like to provide any additional specific feedback. And this year, we extracted, next slide, please. So this year, we extracted 29 unique responses. We exclude things that say like none or NA or leave it blank. And the responses this year centered around 3 primary themes, those being communication, leadership, and operations. So in the communications domain, we received 11 comments with a mix of positive and negative responses. Positive responses included that interactions are prompt and supportive, but that challenges can sometimes be that some particular offices or divisions can be more difficult to get a hold of than others, that some are very prompt and others less so. In the leadership theme, we received 9 overall questions, and those were all overall very positive. Respondents were very supportive of Commissioner Fletcher's leadership, as well as offering praises for individual offices and staff, and expressing support for the new accountability and assessment system. So in the operations domain, we received 7 comments, and they were all either mixed or negative in tone. People expressed concern regarding efficiency in spending, concern for the new accountability model, and support provided by KDE not matching district needs. Are there any questions?
So we are, as I said, we are administering the employee survey as we speak. That it will be done at the end of June. And so come August, I should have those results for you, and we hope that they're just as good as these.
Thank you so much, Karen. And this is intriguing. Holly?
When did you say you implemented the qualifying question?
Last year.
So the January responses, that when it was like 600 respondents, that was.
Yes, February
that's when
of
that
24.
Switch happened, okay.
And so that in count drop, the low in count of this past time, will probably be kind of wonky in the 5-year projections.
Yeah.
Right, the 71% could be a little volatile.
Could be.
Moving forward. So
Agreed, yes.
I would just asterisk or attribute it somehow to a low in count. But,
Yes. And I
it's
still
just
think
such
we
good
need that.
information.
I think we need that qualifying question just because of what we saw in those open-ended questions in the past. Honestly, the mistake was just not having them send it on to the schools and districts. So even though it was primarily teachers that said that they do not work directly with us, that was what led me to make that decision to just send it to the superintendents. But we lost a huge part of our stakeholder group
Right.
by doing that.
Teachers in particular,
Yes.
Other comments or questions? I really, yeah, go ahead, Holly.
The concerns for the new accountability model, were those sent to the right people?
Yeah, and like Abby said, I think there were only like 7 comments in there altogether. So even to call those themes is kind of being generous. But yes, and we do, I know that you asked about FAQs. We do have FAQs. So anytime that we see anything like that, we add it. If it's more than a few, we do add that to our FAQs and make sure that we're getting all of that out.
Julie?
Just one thing I noticed, back on the service average percent that has the bar chart, under the, I understand we learn vision, strongly disagree with 0. So that shows we're making progress on our communication and everybody being on the same page.
Absolutely.
That was heavy on superintendents for that particular
But still,
year.
to have
but
all
still, yeah.
superintendents on board,
Listen,
that's a
we've been working
good
that
first
crowd, yeah.
Based on,
Yes, go ahead.
just, based on like the respondents and different work with KDE offices and so forth. So based on those questions and the data that we have, are those departments then doing strategic goals around increasing those numbers to you, the commissioner, or
So
what's the purpose of the data?
We've talked about it at the leadership level, and then we haven't yet this year, but typically we do break out, well, for the employee survey, we break out by office and give them that information for their own individual office and even division if we have enough people that answered for that division. In this particular case, I'm not really sure, I don't know, Abby, if you've done that analysis to see if there's enough data to share.
No, because we don't tie the question responses back to the offices, the particular offices. The question that asks how often you work with each division, it doesn't tie those specific responses, those questions to those divisions. So in other words, when they're answering the actual survey questions, they're answering them for all divisions. It's not linked back to those, to individual divisions.
And that seems to be just a data point. Like, I don't think it's our goal to increase field engagement with the Office of Legal
Correct.
Services, right?
Right.
Okay, I guess my question would be. why
Okay,
not?
you're off.
Calling for,
This says that we work with
I
them,
don't know.
with that office at least some of the time.
Yeah.
So if teachers are responding to that,
that's what I'm saying,
it's
so
quite likely that they have no reason to engage with Todd's team.
understand that. But I guess I thought it was tailored to those that are working specifically with those departments.
And they
their
may not even
feelings
know.
based on the
One of their,
responses given.
I believe one of the responses can be, I don't know.
Yes.
So they may not even know what department they're talking to, and that's okay too. So again, it would be kind of hard to go back and say, this is what customers think of this particular office.
Now, our pulse check goes back, correct, to the,
Yes, we did add offices to that as well. And again, I believe they can say, I don't know to that one as well.
you know, if we have the opportunity, we get that information back to our specific offices so they can see what improvements they can make.
Yes, with that one, actually, we did put like the services offered. So we give them a better idea. So instead of saying this is the office, we said these are the services. What service were you inquiring about? And then we tied that back to the office. So we will be able to break that one down a little bit better.
So like, for example, if we've asked people about transportation or about food service, they don't really know that goes back to OFO, or Office of Finance and Operations. So now that we're not saying, we're asking them what is the specific service, though we can tie it back to that particular office.
Well, this is Commissioner Karen and Abby, thank you for, it's important for us to see how we're going to know how we are improving and the data that we can consult to help inform further efforts. So I thank you for this report.
Yep. Thank you so much.
The next review item concerns our Perkins State Plan. We'll ask Beth Hargis, Associate Commissioner, to come to the table with Program Manager Lori Looney and Policy Advisor Lauren Graves to please inform us, bring us up to date. Perkins State Plan.
This should be very quick. When you approved our state plan at the last board meeting, and at that time, we had not received our Perkins funding for the year. We have now received that, and we were anticipating $22,025,635, and we told you we'd come to you if it were different. We did get $7,388 less, so that our total allocation for fiscal year '26 is going to be $22,018,247. So we're pleased. It's such an insignificant amount when you're looking at the total that we're okay with it. And so we're hoping that it'll go up coming forward in the future years, but we just wanted to report that to you and happy to answer any questions.
So the amount that we got, what is the actual impact in the classrooms across the state? What are the implications?
Sure. Well, we get the allocation, and per Perkins 5, the funds are split up 10% state leadership. And so that goes to KWIB approved projects that have a statewide impact on CTE. Last KWIB meeting, one of the Perkins State Leadership funded projects on AI through the University of Louisville, spearheaded by Dr. Jeffrey Sun, they presented to the KWIB, and they talked about creating a repository of AI-based resources for school districts across the state. So that's just a sample of Perkins State leadership. Then 5% goes to state administration, and then the lion's share of the funding, 85%, goes to secondary and post-secondary. So 62% goes to secondary, and then 38% goes to post-secondary, directly to ATCs and districts in terms of that 62% secondary.
It's still important to keep up with every dollar, though, right? So we'll be watching this, and with the current guidelines and funding and so forth, are there any discernible changes in priorities or interests that we need to be aware of at the federal level?
Well, I would say that the spirit and intent of Perkins 5 is still very much intact. As I understand it, the kind of dual main thrusts of Perkins 5 would be innovating instruction, and that's a lot of what Perkins funding goes to, so there hasn't really been a shift in that. And then opening accessibility, putting the emphasis on accessibility of high growth, high impact employment training for all students across the state of Kentucky. And I don't see that changing.
No, absolutely not.
Well, thank you. Other comments or questions? Important funding target to watch. Thank you so much. Appreciate the update. And the next review item concerns a report on the audit, the audit report and expense reports for the Kentucky Board of Education and the Commissioner. Matt Ross and Karen Worth will bring us up to date.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Who's on? Good afternoon. I'm Matt Ross. I'm the Associate Commissioner in the Office of Finance and Operations.
I'm Karen Worth, Division of Budgets and Financial Management.
So today we have a report on three audit items, and as well as the expenses of the board and the commissioner. The three audit items are the fiscal year 23 uniform guidance desk reviews. So each school district enters into a contract and is audited annually. The terms of that audit are set by a state committee. And so for fiscal year 23, we had 171 school districts, obviously, and we had 13 sub-recipients that had underwent desk reviews by the APA. Of the school districts, 54 audits were categorized as acceptable, 88 were categorized as acceptable with deficiencies, and 29 received a rating of technically deficient. For the 13 sub-recipients, 10 were categorized as acceptable, 2 were categorized as acceptable with deficiencies, and 1 was categorized as technically deficient. So each one of those then has to correct the audit deficiencies and then resubmit those. And so as of October 7th, 2024, all 30 technically deficient audits were corrected and resubmitted to the District of Financial Management branch in my office. Karen, I'll let you talk about the SWACs. SWACs, there are two SWACs. That's the statewide single audit of Kentucky, volumes 1 and 2. They cover slightly different, cover different areas. So I'll let you share the good news on those.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the SWAC is done in two different volumes. Volume 1 generally covers our general fund dollars and activities, accounting activities within the department. They always look at SEEK, usually look at state match when it comes to community nutrition, and different types of accounting, like I said, accounting processes that we do. Volume 1 was published with no audit findings for KDE, so we're very pleased with that. Volume 2 focuses on our federal funds. For this year, they looked at 21st century and Title IV, and again, we had no audit findings.
So I think you'll also find within your packet a couple spreadsheets, one that details the KBE's expenditures and one that details the commissioner's expenditures. And I don't know that we need to say anything, but we're happy to take any questions you might have on those expenditures or audits.
I just, well, no significant findings is
Great.
good news. What is informative about, that's good news for the board. Board members, you got comment? Blue?
Just a quick question. The color red always scares me in your reports, Karen. So under the commissioner's expenses, commissioner's travel, there's a June 2025 40% in red. I think it's just a typo.
I think so too.
It should be
Yeah.
black. Okay.
We'll get that cleaned up.
That's
before
your story.
next
We're sticking to it.
Any other comments? Thank you so much.
Thank
Matt
you.
King.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Board members, we are ready to take a brief break and proceed to our committee meetings. The State Schools Committee will meet in 516. The United We Learn Committee will meet here in the boardroom. We are scheduled to reconvene as a full board at 3:00 p.m. So thank you, board members. You are recessed, or excused to your committees. The meetings of our board committees. Our first report out will be from the United We Learn Committee. Holly?
All right. Well, we had a very enjoyable committee meeting. It was very exciting to see some of the amazing work that's going on across the state already as far as innovative, vibrant learning experiences. So we had Associate Commissioner Kelly Foster, Division of Innovation Director Sarah Snipes, and one of our regional innovation specialists, Alexa Harden, present. And they had different examples of things across different grade levels, across the state, of things that are happening. And it was really nice to hear about the work of the regional innovation specialist. I didn't really realize what that work was. So it's nice to think that there are some people out there that are providing that kind of support for teachers that in districts that need a little bit more, just implementation kind of direction, those kinds of things, and helping them get started on this pathway or expand what they're doing already. I think we all enjoyed I'm really sorry that everybody didn't get to see all of these examples. Because, last year we saw the defensive learning and that seems to be an example that we hear a lot. So it was nice to kind of branch out from that and see some of these other things within sciences and branching out into communities and connecting those things with these joyful, vibrant experiences that help students become engaged in learning and as I think Alexa said, humanizing the teaching profession again and just reinvigorating our love and passion for teaching and thus helping students want to be at school and learn. So I can't really go through all of the examples that we saw, but please look at the slides that are in your portal because they have some really great examples.
Oh, thank you so much, Holly. I've always felt like we need to have these committee meetings together because we come out of, Randy, I think you can report a similar experience?
Yeah, the same. You want to talk about vibrant learning experiences, we got to see some fantastic examples of that. And as we talk about, and the commissioners talked about, sometimes it's hard to explain what a vibrant learning experience may be, but you can definitely tell it when you see it. And we know some great ones. Some of the highlights that we talked about is that over 25,000 students from 130 school districts received their career certificate in 2024, 2025. That's tremendous when you think about it. Well, it's fantastic. They earned over 8,500 industry certifications with a 59% pass rate. We've increased dual credit opportunities with post-secondary institutions. You'll hear some of the conversation tomorrow from Secretary Link. And we've encouraged innovation and community collaboration. The vibrant learning experiences, we had a 5 examples of that. And from the Glockner Dare to Dream Pitch Contest, we actually had three schools in the state of Kentucky, first, second, and third place in that pitch contest. Each of the students in the different things received over around $5,000 to $5,500 or $6,000 for some individually in that pitch competition, depending on the number in their teams. Some of the ones were Project Stink Stoppers. One of the things that I would love to have, if you ever have those stink bugs at home that you know, or the Asian beetles, their contest, the thing that they designed, they took third place in the state, which was awesome. Second place went to, I guess, in my day it was the home economics, but it's now Family Consumer Sciences. They had the best Alicia's cheesecakes. They sold out 25 Valentine cheesecakes in 2 hours, winning the particular competition. So there's some great things going on in Russell County. So if you're there, you need to get some of Alyssa's cheesecakes. First place, this was quite an honor. It was women in welding or welded horseshoe wreaths and metal art sculptures and so forth for the upcoming, I guess there's a racetrack or something being built in that particular area. So once again, vibrant learning experiences there. Two of the other ones, Ladies in Leadership, focused on empowering women in the steel industry, which is major for Kentucky. And then we also had the Jackson County Area Technology Center, in cooperation with the new high school that's being built. They built all the lockers in the high school from scratch and within there. So some amazing stuff. Yeah, and you should see we're talking about looking at to me, a pro locker room type of wood carving and so forth that they have in there that they did. Some super stuff. Some of the highlights that CTE students earn when they're employed, 4% more employed if they had CTE skills, and they make 12% more than the average student that does not have CTE skills. But I think one of the things that we talk about vibrant learning experiences, I think this is a key thing, that chronic absenteeism statewide, unfortunately, is still high. It's down, but it's 28%. But for CTE students, it's less than 8%. So think about that. So when we talk about vibrant learning experience, we're really talking about engagement and employability skills and being at school and building. And like I said, we'll hear more about Secretary Link's report tomorrow that's going to have a lot more of this information in it. So instead of repeating what he said, I'll let him just update everybody tomorrow on that great work that they're doing. So we want to thank Dr. Beth Engel for that report and Ms. Hargis. And for the future, what we're working on is we're looking at bringing to the full board additional data on the number of students in CTE programs, ATC programs, where it was, where we're going with vibrant learning experiences, how all that's working, and bringing in that particular data to show that vibrant learning is very well. And I think that's, I guess in your committee that you're in charge of for rebranding high schools, one of the things that we've got, we do funding based on ACTs and local, but we really got to get rid of that. It's a separate type of situation. We've got how do we bring this all together? Okay, from vibrant learning experiences into career and post-secondary placement. So that concludes our report.
I think the committees give us a chance to go a little bit deeper in what to know about what to celebrate, knowing about what to celebrate, but also we want to be alert to our challenges and targets that we might be aiming as we think about our own strategies and how we can best support some of this initiative at once again, the local level. And, we're making it happen. And one of the things I always want to be sure we do is count the successes. Each and every one, each student, who has had that aha moment, each student that we can identify who has got a firmer grip on where I want to go in life, and some real solid illumination of how I might get there. Because all of that's going to be the fuel we need to keep going. We've got some steep challenges, and we've got to get more kids having that experience that they know there's a foundation for learning in the state of Kentucky that leads to a future where they will become the contributors and the leaders of their own communities. So I thank you for the committee work and for the inspiring reports that we've had from them. We do now have to get back to business. That is essential. I'm going to ask Associate Commissioner Kelly Foster to come back to the table with Matt Courtney. And we have David Kessler, Superintendent Diocese of Owensboro, Kendra McGuire, Superintendent Diocese of Covington. We're going to look at the issue of certifying the procedures for certification of non-public schools. Welcome. Kelly, would you please
Yes, good
introduce
afternoon.
this issue?
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present this information to you. If you'll remember, several months ago, we came to you to start the process in updating our non-public schools regulation. And part of that process was adding something to the regulation where the Non-Public Schools Committee would present the procedures to the Kentucky Board of Education for review and approval. And so that is where we are at this point in the process, that they're bringing that information to you. I also want to recognize Amanda from my office behind me, who has been collaborating with the KDE team and the Non-Public Schools Association over the last several months to help them and guide them through this process. So at this point in time, I'll turn it over to my policy advisor, Matthew Courtney, and he's going to kick off the presentation.
Thank you and good afternoon. Next slide, please. I'm going to start just with a little background, reminding you how we got here, what we're here to do today. So as a board, under KRS 156160, you are required to have procedures for the voluntary certification of non-public schools. If you remember back in December, we brought you a new regulation that is 704 KAR 3315 that outlines new procedures for how you'll be doing that moving forward. That regulation was actually heard yesterday by the legislature and was approved, and so now is in effect. We have brought with us today David Kessler from the Diocese of Owensboro and Kendra McGuire from the Diocese of Covington to talk through their new procedure manuals that were required under this regulation. So as a reminder, you do give the authority to the Kentucky Non-Public Schools Commission to do the vetting of our schools for certification. They provide that list to you every June. You approve that list for this year during your consent agenda today. So part of this new regulation is that they had to create 3 new policies that would govern how they're going to do this work. And we're asking you today to approve those policies as they do this work on your behalf. So you're going to hear from them about a new policy related to screening and selection of the eligible accrediting agencies. You'll hear a policy related to the process for how they will recommend non-public schools for certification. And then a completely new process for us that we added through this regulation will be the third policy, which relates to how they will recommend certification revocation under extreme circumstances. So I'm going to turn it over to our colleagues to take you through their policy books that they've written. Before I do that, I'll also say these policy books were written in collaboration with the department. They've been heavily reviewed by staff and by the Office of Legal Services before we brought them to you today, so they have full staff endorsement and support today. Okay, I'll turn it over.
All right, first of all, thank you so much for having us today. And thank you to Matthew for all of his help and collaboration working with us. It's been a wonderful experience doing that. So the first policy is the screening and selection of eligible agencies. So if we can go to the next slide, please. New accrediting agency applicants. We put together a list of prior to be considered as approval for a new accrediting agency, what those things would look like. One, they must operate with a governing board. They must be in operation for a minimum of 5 years. They must accredit schools in at least 2 other states besides the state of Kentucky, have an accredited a minimum of 10 schools to this point, and accredit traditional and in-person schools as part of that process. Also, any new accrediting agency applications, they will be put into 3 phases where they will do an application process. They will be in there for candidacy, and then we'll look for a recommendation from our committee deciding whether they fulfill all the requirements that it would be to be a part of an accrediting agency. So we would accept them on a rolling basis. We've seen a few that are newer as they continue to come out. It kind of led it to us to try to look into this process to make sure that we have something in place. The review of applications may take up to 3 months. Applications must be received by August 1st to be considered at the January meeting of our Board of Commissioners. And then applications will be notified of their status by March 1st of that next year. Next slide, please. With this process, as we start to look at new applications for accrediting agencies, we also want to go back and start a rescreening of the ones that we currently already have in place. Approved accrediting agencies must be rescreened every 10 years. We know that through the process, we can't do everybody all at once again, but we would look at starting a schedule of some of that may have been the longest since we've looked at, some of the newer ones, and then start to look at a rolling process of doing that every 10 years. The accrediting agency would receive a notice of rescreening 12 months prior to the deadline for rescreening. Supporting materials would be submitted to our Accreditation and Review Committee and discussed at our regularly scheduled meeting. And then rescreening materials must be received by October 1st of the 10th year of approval. And then those materials will be reviewed and then at our January meeting, and then we would notify them once again on March 1st that they will continue as an accrediting agency. Next slide. So this is the list of currently approved agencies that we have that are used by the Non-Public School Commission, one including our own current process, and then we have a list of others to help take care of our different types of non-public schools that are all covered under our commission. Next slide. And I will allow Kendra to talk a little bit about the non-public school certification process.
Go ahead, next slide, please. So for policy 2, the first policy that we have in here is the certification procedures for new schools. So if there's a new non-public school in Kentucky or a non-public school who is yet to be certified and voluntarily chooses to do so, their process would be to reach out to our commission and seek that new school certification application from us. Upon that request, our commission will meet with the new school leadership to review the process for accreditation in the state of Kentucky that would meet the certification for the state. And so one of the steps that includes this for all non-public schools is that prior to being recommended for certification, they must be accredited by one of the approved agencies of the commission, and they also must demonstrate that they are in compliance with the KRS regulations you see on the screen that govern non-public schools. Next slide, please. So we have a large number of non-public schools who are already certified in the state of Kentucky, and the process for recertification for those schools, if they choose to do so, would be again to reach out to the commission. They would request an application to be recertified, and our process would be very similar to a new non-public school, except this one would just be a recertification. So they would meet the same requirements, showing that they are approved or have gotten, they have gone through the reaccreditation process with the approved accrediting agency, and they must also continue to demonstrate that they are adhering to the KRS regulations as noted on the screen. Next slide, please. As Matthew noted, Policy 3 is a new policy for us for the process, and this is in instances where there would be a recommendation to revoke the certification of a non-public school. Next slide, please. So under extreme circumstances, there may be times where a non-public school is not meeting the basic standards for certification in the state of Kentucky. Should that become evident to the Non-Public Schools Commission, the process will be that we will notify the school that they are non-compliant with the requirements for certification. And at that time, if we have to notify a school of their non-compliant status, we would also notify the Kentucky Board of Education of that as well. If a school is notified that they're non-compliant, what we will go through is a process. They will be placed on probation, and they will have to submit a corrective action plan to get their school up to the proper standards. So through that process, there will be a timeline established for the corrective action plan, at which time, when that concludes, they will return to the Non-Public Schools Commission to show the progress they have made with their corrective action steps. And then from there, they will either be reapproved as a school. There's a possibility that we could extend the deadline if they need more time to get their school up to the proper standards, or there's a possibility that we would recommend that their certification status needs to be revoked to the Kentucky Board of Education. Next slide, please. And I think I went through that ahead of time. Let me just make sure. Yes, and so I think that concludes that. Yes. Any questions for us?
This
How many
item is-
non-public schools are there in Kentucky?
I'm not sure. Yeah, do we?
Yeah, I actually wouldn't be able to answer that question because they're not all a part of our commission and they're not all certified.
So if they're not certified, do we not recognize then the diplomas that come out of those schools?
So, go ahead. So KDE doesn't recognize those diplomas, but we have had times where colleges have reached out to KDE wanting to verify. So if it's a local public school district, we point them in that direction, and if it's not a public school district, then we point them in the direction of the commission. And from there, the commission can say, yes, this is one of our certified schools, or it's not. And then those schools that aren't certified by a local public school district or the commission, then that's up to the college or university if they're going to accept that transcript or certificate of completion.
So am I hearing that the local school district can certify one of these schools?
No.
I'm hearing incorrectly then.
So I'm not saying you're incorrect. I just probably didn't say it correctly.
I've been incorrect many
No,
times.
a local school district cannot certify one of those schools. This commission certifies schools that apply for certification, but there could be other schools out there, a home school or another non-public school that just isn't certified.
And so there is no KDE diploma. So those public schools, the school district certifies that diploma when they award that to the student. So I think that's probably the confusion. So they don't certify the schools, they certify diplomas for their high schools in their district. I think that's what Dr.
So
Foster was referring
KDE,
to.
we have minimum graduation requirements, but each local school district can add additional requirements to receive, for example, the Franklin County diploma or the Warren County diploma.
So in your area, Danville Christian Academy may or may not be certified. It's a choice that they make from one of these agencies if they want to be a part of the non-public schools in Kentucky. There are other Christian academies that aren't certified at all.
Okay, thank you.
Board members, I would thank you for that presentation of the
If I may
certification
add.
process. Yes.
And to reemphasize, emphasize what Dr. Foster had said, so if you have a school system that is not certified, then it's up to the college on whether or not to accept that diploma to allow that student for admission to a college or university. So if they're not certified, that's up to the college or university whether or not they want to accept it, or to a business.
Or the employer.
Or the employer, either one.
No, I think, please.
Confusing.
It is. Are we ready? Please ask the board to offer a motion regarding the approval of a certification process for non-public schools developed by the Kentucky Non-Public Schools Commission. Is there such a motion?
Are we doing motions for approvals
Yes.
and then the others?
Yes.
Okay,
Are you offering that motion?
so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further question? I'll call the question then. All those in favor of approving the process presented to us by the Kentucky Non-Public Schools Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much. I know this is very, very tedious work, but it's also very important.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate your partnership.
I'm taking note here that there is interest in further discussion regarding certification and credentials. So we'll talk about that for further elaboration at a subsequent point, so.
Madam Chair, and my
Yes.
question was, there was also information in there about revocation, not
Yes.
just approval. Was that all in the same
These were all the
procedure?
procedures.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
yes. The next item in our action discussion agenda concerns preschool per-child rates. Going to ask Associate Commissioner Greta Hilton and KDE Policy Advisor Melody Cooper to come to the table. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you. So before you is an annual item for the board's review and consideration of approval for the per-child preschool funding rates. And I'm going to turn it over to Melody Cooper to take a deeper dive into that presentation.
Good afternoon. Glad to be here with you today. So just to remind you, this is, as Greta said, this is an annual item where you approve these per-child rates. Statute requires that Kentucky provides a developmentally appropriate preschool program for all eligible children. And so when you're approving these per-child rates, it helps us determine how to allocate the pot of money that's allocated from the general funds for state-funded preschool, because it is a separate amount that KDE disperses to districts for that. So next slide. So there is a funding formula for that, and it's based on the enrollment of preschool students, eligible preschool students in districts based on their December 1 and March 1 enrollments from the previous academic year. And so while there is a per child amount, the overall sum has not changed. So we get a little over 84 million each year for this. And so the rates are based on the category of enrollment. So the at-risk kids would be eligibility based on income, and then speech and developmental delays, that's a standard rate. And then there's a weighted category for 3 and 4-year-olds with severe disabilities. Next slide. And so these are, we work closely with the Office of Finance and Operations to determine the per-child rates every year based on enrollment. And because the pot of money from the General Assembly does not change, the per-child rates really just change based on the enrollment numbers. And so you can see the current numbers that were calculated with the formula this year. They've gone up slightly because, as you'll see in the next slide, the enrollment has decreased slightly. And so that's why they change from year to year. The big pot of money hasn't changed, but the per-child rates change. So next slide. And so there you can see a historical view of our enrollment rates. You know, obviously there was a big dip during the pandemic time, but we've normalized out. And like I said, we just had a minor drop this past year, and that is the total enrollment of eligible students, both students with disabilities and income eligible students. Next. And I think that's it. So we're just asking that you approve these rates so that we can determine district allocations. I'm happy to take
Questions, comments?
No, just, I'll move that we accept the rates.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay, Randy and Steve, appreciate it. Now I'll ask any questions, debate, concerns? Yes,
Just a
Holly.
question. What percentage of eligible preschoolers actually enroll?
I would have to dig back into my notes to give you that answer.
Just a
I've got it in
guess.
some research. We've included that in our budget requests, I believe, where we look at the percentage of 4-year-olds who are enrolled. And I cannot recall that number right off the top of my head. I'd have to get it to you.
Good or pretty low? I mean,
I don't think it's near the 70% that would be considered state or universal preschool. So there are some organizations where they consider that if 70% of 4-year-olds are enrolled, and age is the only criterion for inclusion, that 70% would be considered universal preschool, and I don't think we're anywhere near that. And I apologize, I just can't bring that percentage off the top of my head, but I can definitely get it to you.
well, I was just curious, and that number is just the state funded, so there's lots of children in preschools that are not
Head
represented
Start
here.
And heads.
Right, yes.
And Kentucky is experiencing a declining birth rate. So in terms of the actual number of children under age 5, that's lower each year lately, right?
Right.
I think that is right. So that's a compounding factor.
Plus, isn't it also, there's people have put in for applications, but they don't qualify at the same time,
Yeah, the percentage of poverty.
or speech category.
Or, yeah.
I'm going to bring the question of approving this per-child rate as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much to both
Thank
of
you.
you. Our next action item concerns workplace learning. Pardon me. So we welcome back to the table Beth Hargis and KDE Work-Based Learning Coordinator Tina Brogili.
We are going to be asking for approval for the work-based learning placements that are not associated with the work-based learning course nor offered during the regular school calendar. So these placements per statute must be brought to the KBE for approval to qualify for the post-secondary readiness. As you can see, KRS 158-6455 was amended in 2023 to include as part of post-secondary readiness for the state accountability what we refer to as a non-traditional work-based learning, measured by completing a required number of hours or achieving a benchmark within an apprenticeship, cooperative experience, or an internship that is not required to be offered as a high school course, nor during the regular school day, week, or year. It must be aligned with a credential or associate degree and approved by the board after receiving input from LSAC. And so Tina Brogel, our work-based learning coordinator, will walk you through the following slides. Next slide, please.
We're excited to report that as of May the 19th, we had 1,027 traditional work-based learning experiences that have already been reported at Infinite Campus and will be included in the accountability calculations. Schools have until July 31st to get their data in, and we anticipate that number to grow based on the date, the deadline of that data entry. Next slide, please. As of May 1st was the deadline for submissions of the non-course code work-based learning experiences that we're going to bring before you today. For the current year, we received 12 applications, with 5 of those meeting the criteria for approval. That's a 42% approval rate, which is up from last year's 19% approval rate. For the 23-24 academic year, we did receive 42 applications, and we requested approval for only 8 of those. While we had fewer applications, more relevant opportunities were presented in this year's applications. So that would be the reason for the increased percentage of acceptance. Next slide, please. These are the 5 rubric questions, or 5 of the rubric questions that were used or utilized as part of the scoring process for determining eligibility. And for the current year, All of the denied applications did fail to meet the criteria of alignment to credentials or an associate degree as outlined in the statute.
And so we are happy to take any questions you might have.
Are there questions?
Do you feel comfortable giving an example of a job that was denied, or does that feel like a breach of confidentiality?
Well, I know last year we had a broader spectrum to look at, and so you might have last year someone that was working in fast food. Well, now fast food could, you might want to say that there's an alignment to culinary there. But if the person, when you look at the culinary standards and you're looking at the true alignment to the credential,
Okay.
if someone is standing there and maybe they're just, they're frying French fries all day, then that doesn't really align to the standards or the credentials. So we have to look at them. Now, again, this year, we didn't have quite as many of those, and so they were more relevant, but that's what we're looking at when we're making those determinations. And we do have a team that looks at them. It's not up to one person.
Yeah, I appreciate that example, and thank you.
Do you feel there's anything that is prohibitive to supporting this? Sometimes policies can be a little restrictive. Is there anything after, seeing so many of these come through that you think, this is actually keeping some good opportunities out?
I really don't think so. I mean, again, I think we are held accountable for, ensuring that it's meeting the benchmarks that's legislated. And so, it's outside of the school day or, calendar year. So you can do this in the summer. And, there's a lot of ways that it could go south as far as, someone not really doing the work and not really demonstrating the standards. But we make sure that we have approval from the employer that the student actually did the work and they're signing off. We're ensuring that we've got the 300 hours that's required. So I don't feel like it's prohibitive.
So it's work-based learning, and all that has to be documented. All right, we have a motion here regarding recommendations for our work-based learning placements for state accountability. I'd like a motion to approve this proposal.
So moved.
Okay, Harold?
Yes.
Second.
Thank you. Any further question?
Quick one, I may have asked Todd this last year, but I've forgotten. Is there an appeals process? for the
Yeah.
There's not an official appeals process. However, what we have done is looked at those, and if there's been something that's left out that we felt like was a mistake, we have reached back out to the district to say, we have a clarifying question.
Should resubmit.
So, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So, Vice Chair Young, keeping in mind what this is, it is about the school's accountability classification for students who participated in work-based learning outside of the school day, not associated with a school program.
Right.
There is an overall ability for a school to appeal its accountability classification at the end once all of the data pieces come in. This is just one data piece that would be included in that. But there are procedures for a school to appeal its overall accountability classification once that is made public.
Thank you.
I'll put the question. All in favor of approving the proposed work-based learning placements standards for procedure for accountability, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much. Our next item regards academic standards in career studies and financial literacy. Dr. Hargis and Sharon Collins, Lauren Graves will present this proposal, the amendments to these regulations.
Thank you
So-
again. And I'm going to turn it over to Sharon and to Dr. Graves to run you through these slides.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. I do want to introduce to you the Kentucky Academic Standards for Career Studies and Financial Literacy. These standards go under review every 6 years, and we have committees for the career studies as well as the financial literacy teams to review these. If we have slides. The document is organized into 3 main domains. We have the essential skills, which are under KRS 158.1453. We have careers and then financial literacy. We had a career studies team that we started back in August of 2024, where committees were chosen. And then we went through the application process. We sent out public comment on the existing standards. And then after that, the committees met, we reviewed. We had a team that wrote the new standards if they felt there was a necessity to rewrite. Then that draft went out for another public review. And then we met again to go over those comments. And then, of course, we are presenting to LSAC last week and to you all today. And that same process was followed for financial literacy. The development teams consisted of business professionals, many teachers. The financial literacy team specifically, we sought out people from the financial world to help us in making these decisions. So we had representation from credit unions, the Kentucky Financial Empowerment Commission, Kentucky Jumpstart, as well as many high school educators, middle school, elementary, and post-secondary. They created the writer's vision statement for what they wanted to accomplish during this time. The organization of the standards, as I said, are in 3 main domains, which include essential skills, the careers, and financial literacy. And then they are arranged by grade bands, K through 3, 4 and intermediate, 4, 5, middle school, 6 through 8, and high school, 9 through 12. And then we have a coding process where that is on the screen now, that, for example, FL stands for financial literacy, the I is for intermediate, and then we have the number for the standard. Next slide, please. This gives an example of the essential skills for middle school, and as I said, this is under KRS 158.1413. And this requires that all students in elementary, middle, and high school receive this essential workplace instruction. Next slide, please. This gives an example of the careers and how it is formatted. I will say that we've undergone a little architectural change so it's available to all people. Next slide, please. And this is an example of the financial literacy for high school. Next slide, please. As I said earlier, the public comments were sent out through various means. Kentucky Teacher, the Office of Career and Technical Education newsletters, as well as some other program consultant newsletters. Next slide, please. This gives us just an example of the public comments that were received and the number of people that did participate. Next slide, please. Again, that is the financial literacy. And then we had the overall chart of the March public comments. So this did not include the public comments that went out last October prior to the committee's meeting. Are there any questions?
Okay, this is academic standards regarding, pardon me, in career studies and financial literacy. Questions? There's I'd like a motion to approve these standards. All those, please, from the board?
So moved.
Yes, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you so much. All those in favor? I don't want to rush you. All those, is there further discussion or any questions that we need to address before I call for a vote? Hearing none, I'm going to ask the question. All in favor of these standards, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
We'll now consider amendments to 704 KAR 8030 and 704 KAR 8050. We'll be taking these two items together, and we'll have at the table, Dr. Tucker, please present your team.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of KBE, and our Commissioner Fletcher. We have 3 items up for amendment here, and our fabulous team here will discuss those amendments and the standards revision process. And I'm going to add very briefly, not only bragging on the OTL team, but all the staff and teams here when we look at revision of standards. I know Dr. Poe asked a question earlier about the curriculum review process. How does a school district take the standards revision, then incorporate certain curriculum into the teaching of, let's say, social studies? And that's exactly what's intended, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a robust process, for which we do have here, really the most thorough process I've seen in terms of taking the standards, breaking those standards down, and then ensuring that our school districts can create a very vibrant curriculum. It's just fabulous here, again, being a curriculum savant, a curriculum, someone who's crazy about curriculum. I'm just blown away at the work that we do across the agency here. So I'll now turn it over to our team to discuss the standards revision process and the amendments.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker, and good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Mickey Ray Marinelli. I serve as the Chief in the Office of Teaching and Learning. At the table with me is Crystal Rowland, the Director of the Division of Program Standards, and she'll be speaking to the first 2 regulations that we're bringing forward for your review and approval. And then we also have at the table Sarah Medley. She is the Policy Advisor of the Office of Teaching and Learning, and Sarah will be speaking to both the statutes and regs for all 3 of the items that we have before you today. So we are asking you to consider both the required academic standards for health education and for physical education. We're presenting them together, but they are 2 separate regulations, and so it will require approval just as the chair described, in 2 different votes for each of those. But they were reviewed together by the committee, so we wanted to bring those forward to you as a whole package. As you know, KRS 158.6453 requires that we have a process of standards review every 6 years. And so these 2 are up for your consideration today. So I'll turn it over to Sarah to begin with the policy side of this.
Okay, thank you. It is wonderful to see you again. The statutory authority for you to promulgate this regulation is in 2 statutes. First, it's KRS 156160, and that requires the KBE to establish courses of studies for Kentucky's common schools. It also requires the KBE to adopt administrative regulation that governs the physical health and education and overall physical well-being of Kentucky students. Also, as Mickey mentioned, KRS 1586453 establishes the standards review process, which includes the academic standards for practical living skills, which would be PE and health. And then for the next slide, we are bringing, as you saw or heard, 2 regulations. 704 KAR 8030 establishes the standards for health education,
And there is a new material incorporated by reference, but the content of the regulation itself really hasn't changed at all. And that is also the case for 704 KAR 8050 for physical education, which also has a new material incorporated by reference. And I will pass it over to Crystal if there's no questions of me, so she can describe the standards review process for you.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm excited to share the process of taking our standards from where they are, taking them through that revision process that's outlined in KRS 158.6453, and bringing the draft to you that you're seeing today. The process is outlined on the screen there, and we're in the final row, which is bringing the standards forward to the board to approve so that we can begin that regulatory process. We began in that first row by really establishing our advisory panels and review committees, and those include classroom teachers who are teaching health and physical education, as well as members from higher education and business and community members who work in fields that depend on the content area of health and physical education. And so our committee members came together. They represented both health education and physical education, as well as geographical representation of Kentucky, so a very balanced group. And they took a look at public feedback. So the current standards went out for public comment for 30 days, and they review that public comment. They look at research, they look at other state standards, and they recommend revisions. So they created a draft. That draft was sent out for public comment for another 30 days. They review that final feedback and make some final recommendations, and that resulted in the draft that we're bringing forward to you today. On the next slide, you'll see some of their guiding principles that really anchored their work. In that first round of public feedback, they saw some needs that they really wanted standards written in clear and precise language for their content area. They wanted standards that were developmentally appropriate and aligned across grade bands. They had a desire to remain aligned to national standards that was reflected in the public feedback, as well as providing support and clarity for teachers that might be new to education or new to the classroom. And they had a guided vision that really was standards that would support physical and health education that provides sustained opportunities for Kentucky students of all abilities, backgrounds, and grade levels to develop lifelong physical literacy and health literacy. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at some of the public feedback we received. There were 119 responses across both of the public comment periods. There were broad stakeholder representation, and there was a desire to remain aligned with the national Shape America standards, and we had previously been aligned with those, and they were recently updated. So that was one of the updates that you'll see in our current draft that we're bringing forward. Once they made that revision and we sent it back out, the feedback on the draft was very positive. You see over 88% of all respondents selected to keep them as is for health education and over 95% for physical education. And for those that didn't select as is, they commented that they really appreciated the standards, so they just didn't check that box. Some feedback that we received was some recommendations for additional clarity, and so the committee members added some examples in, added some additional clarification on progressions for physical education, and then they developed a glossary and some clarification resources that will live on KBE standards to support teachers as they begin to implement. On the next slide, these are some of the key highlights of the revision. So they updated the writer's vision statement. They aligned the standards and performance indicators to those national trends and research, and then they updated the layout as well. And so a peek at the architecture, at the top you'll see the standard, and those are anchor standards similar to how you saw for visual and performing arts. So they're consistent across all grade bands. And underneath is a rationale, and that provides context for the teacher about what is included in that broad overarching standard for students. It's supported by grade band, by performance indicators that are specific for the grade band. So in elementary school, you'll see a progression of skills to support students in that grade band, and then it moves within middle school and high school as well. And then the standards coding was updated so that you have the standard number, the last grade in that progression band, and the performance indicator at the end. On the next slide, you'll see these are the 8 anchor standards for health education, and so they're common across all grade bands within the standards document. And these 8 standards provide cognitive content to promote healthy lifestyles throughout childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. These standards are student-focused, and they describe a health literate student. So they foster opportunities for students to develop many of our competencies in our model portrait of a learner, including critical thinker, effective communicator, empowered learner, and productive collaborator. So the grade level performance indicators promote health enhancing behaviors and disease prevention. And again, these repeat across all grade bands within health education, and that color coding is consistent across.
So if I may, in these standards, I assume somewhere in there is human sexuality and reproduction, so not a lot of content changes there on the part of SHAPE.
We did have to remove the one 5th grade standard that was out
Okay,
of compliance with
Senate Bill 150.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
but there are still what I think are appropriate, developmentally appropriate standards that are going to address those issues as students move into middle and high school.
Thank you.
And I would add to that, so the anchor standards are aligned, but the performance indicators are very much Kentucky-based and very much foundational with our existing standards and just updated to be in alignment with statutes and regulations that apply in Kentucky.
Thank you.
On the next slide, you'll see we have 4 anchor standards for physical education, and these encompass the cognitive content and development to develop and maintain physically active lifestyles throughout childhood, adolescence, and into adulthood. And these standards are based on grade band performance indicators that focus on building physical competence, motivation, confidence, and knowledge. They focus on the well-being of the whole person and their physical literacy journey, including the psychomotor, cognitive, social, and affective learning domains. These 4 anchor standards communicate the broader learning of the performance indicators that promote and produce physically literate students in all grade levels. And again, these support many of our competencies of portrait of a learner, similar to health education, as they promote relevant and developmentally appropriate critical thinking about lifelong movement and wellness, as well as respectful behaviors towards the self, others, and equipment. And again, I just really want to thank everybody who participated on the committees for writing the standards, specifically our teachers. It's a big ask to take them away from the classroom, but they are definitely very passionate, and we appreciate them sharing their expertise with us. And we appreciate superintendents and principals for accommodating their release, because we know that it's challenging to have teachers away from the classroom, but they are so critical in this work and really ensuring that we have standards that support student learning in the way that we're able to bring forward today. So I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have about our health and PE standards.
Questions, comments? I will ask the board to offer a motion to approve amendments to 704 KAR 8030, required academic standards for health. May I have such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'll ask again. Debate, further questions? I'll put the vote. All those in favor of these amended regulations, amended standards, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you so much. Next, I'll ask the board to entertain a motion to approve amendments to 704 KAR 8050, required academic standards for physical education.
So moved.
I have a motion from Lou. Is there a second?
Second that.
Thank you, Harold. Is further debate, discussion? All right, I'll ask for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there a second? I mean, are any opposed? I don't want to forget to count those who are opposed. We have unanimous action so far. Thank you so much. The next review vote concerns amendments to 704 KAR 4010, physical education. And we have the team before us. Thank you. Present this
Absolutely.
item, please.
So you're stuck with us for this one as well, but the OTL is bringing forward this regulation for technical amendments. And this regulation specifically provides the guidelines to schools and districts for issuing exemptions or substitutions for physical education due to physical conditions or religious objections. So I'm going to ask Sarah to walk you through the specific technical amendments that are before you today.
This regulation would have been on your list of consent agenda items because it really just needed to be recertified to avoid expiration. But the changes were considered substantive, so we brought them here to you. The guidelines have not changed at all for schools and districts, and this regulation has been in law since 1991. But it does update the name of the board. And then it also references the standards for physical education, which you just approved. It references that regulation instead of the old regulation, which is no longer in law. But we're happy to take any additional questions.
I'm going to guess that I can get a motion to approve.
So moved, Madam Chair.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you so much, and I am going to put the question. All in favor of amendments to K704 KAR 4010, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you guys for this work. We really appreciate it. And the next item concerns amendments to regulations regarding vehicles designed to carry 9 passengers or less. We'll hear from Matt Ross. Is Che here? And KBE Policy Advisor Lindsay Schwartz. Thank you.
So we're gonna literally ask you to change gears here, so.
Hey, put the brakes on that stuff, man.
Hey, I felt like we needed it, you know, it's been a long day.
We're going from physical education to the clutch.
I think the wheels are falling off.
So this regulation is an amendment to what we call the van regulation, but it's really 9 passenger or less vehicles. So any passenger car that's smaller than a school bus, right? So, and we know there's been some amendments to the law around these type of vehicles that has required us to bring this regulatory amendment. So I wanted to read you our promulgatory authority, or the what we're required to do by statute. KRS 156-153 was amended in 2024 to require the Kentucky Board of Education to promulgate administrative regs establishing the minimum standards and specification for non-school bus passenger vehicles, minimum route safety standards, and pickup and drop-off protocols, and minimum qualifications, training, and drug testing requirements for an individual to be authorized to transport any student to and from school using a non-school bus passenger vehicle. KRS 189-540 was amended in 2025 to require the KBE to promulgate administrative regulations to govern the operation of passenger vehicles owned, leased, or privately contracted by the district that transports students. So this is a situation where LSAC really played a vital role in the formulation of this regulation. We had a version that we took to LSAC in February. And LSAC really responded with some really hard questions and really got us to go back and take a look and rework what we had done. And so I think we're bringing to you a better version today, a version that is strictly as close to the statutory requirements without putting a lot of additional extra belts and suspenders type things that we had probably built into the original regulation. And so I'll sort of take you through what each section does as quick as I can. Section 1 is a definitional section. Not a lot of exciting stuff there. Section 2 talks about the alternate transportation plan, which districts are required to have in order to use these vehicles. We kept it as simple as possible, and that the 2 requirements of an alternate transportation plan are the number of vehicles you intend to use and why you're not going to use a school bus for these purposes. acknowledging that school, it's sort of a nod that school buses are always your safest way to transport students. Section 3 talks about vehicle requirements, so that's your signage, the equipment you're required to have in your passenger van or vehicle, so like first aid kits, fire extinguisher, seatbelt cutters, those kind of things. Section 4 is the route safety standards. We kept that very close to the statute, which is basically you can't obstruct traffic, you shouldn't drop students off where they have to cross the streets, and drivers should not use their cell phones except in emergency. Section 5 really gets into driver qualifications, and that's a district is required to adopt a policy by statute. And so what are the things in that policy? Basically, what's your drug policy? What happens if your driver gets a criminal violation? Like the things that, what is your district policy as far as those drivers, right? And then one of the things we heard was around the medical exam. We'd required an annual medical exam in the original version, and they said, hey, our school bus drivers, it got pushed back to an annual or a medical exam every 24 months. So we included that in our updated version. Section 6 is the drug testing policy. By statute, that has to sort of mimic the federal for school bus drivers. So we just reference the federal statute around that. Then driver training, which is another area we heard a little bit of feedback, and we have cut that down. There's an initial 3-hour training, which the driver gets, which is the training program is developed by KBE, and it has to be delivered by a certified driver trainer. And then there's an annual 3-hour update, and that's a district-specific update, and that includes sort of district specific issues that they might encounter, whether it be, whatever they're using the van for. So some areas in Kentucky are hilly, some are, each district has their own sort of needs. And then there's a first aid and CPR class is required every 2 years. Section 8 is insurance requirements. There was a change there from $1 million coverage to $1.5 million coverage. We arrived at that number by going out and looking for something comparable and seeing what other, was there anything out there comparable? And so what we found was common carriers of this size vehicle are required to have $1.5 million worth of insurance coverage. So feeling like school districts shouldn't have less coverage, we pegged it at that. And then Section 9 is around inspections. Initially, we had a pre and post trip, and our inspection forms were similar to our school bus and included some items that we heard from LSAC. A normal driver may not be able to see this type of system on a van, right? So, so we slimmed those down, made it the more obvious, made it easier, I think, and we limited it to a post or a pre-trip inspection and did away with the post-trip inspection. So we took it to LSAC prior to this meeting, and it was unanimously approved. So I think everybody was pretty happy.
LSAC is legal?
So local superintendent, I was going to do that. Local Superintendent's Advisory Committee is a statutory committee that any regulation that comes before you or any policy change goes to them first. It's a group of, 9 or so 11 superintendents. So by statute, they you must take any changes to policy or regulation before them first, let them give comments and feedback. So every regulation you heard prior to this that was up for amendment went before them and we received feedback. So it was a great process, a great interactive, and that's what it's really supposed to do. So we appreciate their feedback, and I think we arrived at a much better product at the end.
There's seven that are appointed by Supreme Court district, and then the four others are at large.
Has there been a legal review liability litigation for these changes?
So our Office of Legal Services reviews all legals, all amendments to and all new regulations before you see them.
Just had to ask, Matt.
Yeah, I get it.
Well, the use of this type of vehicle is getting to be, it's growing. And so we need the regulations and we need to support school districts in the use of them. Todd, do you have any additional comment to offer?
Thank you. As Matt indicated, all of the regulations that come before the board come to the Office of Legal Services for a full review prior to them coming to the board for being recommended to the board for approval. The use of the van or vehicle to carry 9 passengers or less is a district decision. They don't have to use vehicles of this nature to carry students, but the General Assembly has signaled that they want them to have the ability to do so.
Commissioner?
Again, I think this was a great example of the collaboration process of working with our local superintendent advisory council to say, these are things that, you know, you have boots on the ground. You're seeing what's happening each and every day versus maybe what we would see, and getting that experience from practitioners. And also, too, I'd like to compliment Matt and his group. They also went back to the bill sponsor to talk about what was the intent of what was there, too. So it was a good process. Again, in February, that after taking it to LSAC, we felt like we would come back, get more input, make sure we get to where we needed to be, and then finally it was unanimously approved by LSAC, too.
Julie?
Yeah, I just want to compliment Matt and his crew too, because I do listen to LSAC. So I've heard all the itinerations and the feedback and the concern of the superintendents, and they really listen to the group, so.
Thank you.
Well, our commissioner comes with much LSAC experience.
That's right, Chair.
Having served in that capacity as well. So I'm going to ask the board for a motion to approve these, the amendments so that we can keep up with serving our school districts in this regard. This is amendment to 702 KAR 5130. May I have such a motion? Julie, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I will put the question. All in favor of approving these amendments, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I thank you. That's been quite a full agenda. And now I'm going to ask the board to take a short recess so that we can get the room prepared to receive our colleagues who are members of the Education Professional Standards Board, who will be with us at the table as we open the question of our collaborative space and our unique responsibilities and how we can leverage both the authority and the responsibility to maintain quality in the education workforce. So I think we will probably need about, 10 minutes? 10 minutes, and we'll reconvene, and our colleagues will be here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair Robinson and Vice Chair Young and KBE members. The EPSB is excited to join you today and hear more about the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness and how it serves both boards.
Thank you so much. It's very exciting to have you all around the same very large table. So we do want to take a moment to thank the team here that made this possible. It actually took some logistics to figure out where all these chairs could be located. So kudos to them for making it happen. I think it's really important that you all spend some time together, hearing about your goals for the educator workforce and coming up with a plan where you can be mutually supportive of each other moving forward. I think great things lay ahead for both boards. So to begin, I wanted to provide an overview on the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness. It is the newest office at the department. So just some background before we sort of talk about the specifics. On August 1st, 2018, through an executive order, Governor Matt Bevin at the time transferred the administrative functions of the Education Professional Standards Board to the Department of Education. Under his executive order, the authority of the EPSB Executive Director was transferred to the Commissioner of Education.
And so what does it mean to have the administrative functions of the Professional Standards Board fall under KDE? That is what we're going to talk about today, and hopefully at the conclusion of our presentation, you'll have a better understanding about how our office supports both boards in fulfilling your missions. If we could go to the next slide. This is a graphic that I've shared with you previously, and just want to remind you of sort of our touch points as an office. So whenever we're thinking about any initiative, we're thinking about how it fits within this full cycle of teacher recruitment and retention, and how we can enhance and support our educator workforce in any initiative that we take upon our work in the office. Next slide, please. So this is our office organizational chart. So when the office was originally created, there were 3 divisions, and that mirrored what the divisions were when EPSB was a separate agency with its own administrative staff. However, after the first year at the department, it was determined that the workflow made more sense divided into 2 divisions, and that is the structure that we have now. So we have the Division of Educator Preparation and Certification under the leadership of Division Director Todd Davis, and we have the Division of Educator Recruitment and Development under the leadership of Dr. Vita Stewart. You'll notice on the side that we do have our Principal Partnership Project, and that is a special group of 3 former principals that provide support to administrators all across the state. They are contractors that we have in our office. They have some very specific responsibilities to fulfill some statutory requirements, but they also have created a variety of supports for principals to help ensure that the leadership in our schools is strong. But overall, you can see that in these 2 divisions, there's very distinct responsibilities. We have the Educator Certification Branch. As you can imagine, they are responsible for all of our educator certification issuance. We have the Educator Preparation Branch. They are responsible for working with our educator preparation programs to ensure compliance with all of the required statutes and regulations around educator program quality, as well as working in partnership with our accrediting bodies to ensure that our institutions have satisfied all accreditation requirements. In the Division of Educator Recruitment and Development, they are the proud home of Go Teach KY, our educator recruitment and retention campaign, as well as some new initiatives. The Kentucky Teacher of the Year program is now facilitated through that division, as well as some other initiatives around educator mentorship. So the structure is sort of clearly designed, but let's go to the next slide and you can see how the responsibilities sort of divide between the 2 boards. So in this Venn diagram, I did teach 2nd grade, so I do love a good Venn diagram. So you can see that the Education Professional Standards Board does have very distinct statutory authority, and they are able to promulgate regulations due to that authority. And so they have, as I mentioned, regulations that oversee educator preparation and accreditation, program review, certification issuance, cooperating teachers. We know that there are expectations for the amount of hours that our pre-service educators spend in field experience. So all of that monitoring and oversight is a directive given to us by the Professional Standards Board. That new teacher induction over the educator mentorship program, that is something that is a direct support that our office provides to EPSB, as well as the oversight of the entrance and exit assessments. We have Praxis currently, and so the monitoring of that and ensuring that that is clearly communicated to our EPPs and our pre-service educators, that is in support of EPSB. As well as rank change. So EPSB has authority over rank change expectations, and so the processing of rank change also is supported in our office. And I would say those are specific responsibilities that reside with the Professional Standards Board. On the other side of the Venn diagram, we have our Kentucky Board of Education, and we have several regulations that are overseen by the state board that also dictate some of the work our office is responsible for. For example, certified evaluation plans are housed in our office. Todd Davis provides consultation and support to districts as they develop their certified evaluation plans. We know that in 2017, there were some pretty significant changes to the evaluation process, so we do not collect teacher evaluation data as was done previously, but we are responsible for ensuring that every district has an approved plan in place. We also, as I mentioned, have the Principal Partnership Project. As part of supporting administrators, that is a directive from the state board, from the Kentucky Board of Education. And so having those 3 Principal Partnership Project team members is in direct response to that work. Teacher of the Year program, national board certification, so those opportunities for leadership. There is an expectation that the department support superintendent training. That contract is currently held by the Association of School Administrators, KASA. And so that satisfying that expectation, we support that as well. We do have the Teaching and Learning Pathway and Educators Rising in our office. So all CTE pathways are a direct response to an issuance from the state board. And so all of that work falls more squarely into the oversight of the state board. However, I would say the most important work that we have perhaps lies in that overlapping area on the Venn diagram. And at the very top there, we have our recruitment and retention efforts. You have heard me talk at length about our Go Teach initiative, our new website, our campaign to help recruit the next generation of educators and support our current in-service educators so that we can address the educator shortage. That is a priority for both EPSB and KBE. Having the highest quality educators in our classroom is a #1 goal for all of us. We want to ensure that our students have the best and the brightest in front of those classrooms. We also have in our office the support of the local education assignment data, or LEAD reporting. And that is where every district has to assure that they have teachers assigned to courses that have the appropriate credentials to teach those courses. And so that is something that really overlaps with both boards. So they have to have the right certificate, but the course identification and the appropriate qualifications for that course are determined in collaboration with the Office of Teaching and Learning as we think about that course content. And so that really is an overlap between both boards. We also support the Kentucky Educator Placement Service, which we know is the repository of all vacancies in the state for our certified positions. That system, although not perfect, is statutorily mandated, and we are required to keep the vacancies updated. Districts have to put any position that is open. They are expected to pull those positions once they are filled, but there is sometimes a delay, so it isn't always the best reflection of the vacancies. But that is something that is sort of in support of both boards, making sure that we can, again, have qualified educators in the classroom. And lastly, you'll see the Impact Kentucky Working Conditions Survey. That is a survey that we offer biannually to educators that allows them an opportunity to speak to working conditions in their building. We currently have a contract with Panorama Education, and they provide the survey to educators. We typically have a pretty high response rate in the low 80s of individuals who choose to complete the survey, and we support the dissemination of those results as well as professional learning around using those results as an opportunity for improvement of our schools. And that really is something that both boards can see value in. So that isn't everything that our office does, but I think is a good presentation of where there are certain responsibilities that we have in our office that can be specifically tied to one board or the other, but certainly there are overlapping goals and priorities that both boards can say are of great importance. Okay, next slide. Very excited that we have Nora here to provide an overview on the Education Professional Standards Board. I will say that our EPSB members could also probably give a very detailed overview similar to what Nora is going to provide, but we felt it was important that she provide an overview of the educator misconduct review process and some information about EPSB just so that everyone has that same sort of foundational understanding. So Nora, thank you.
Thank you all so much for having us all here together. My name is Nora Softich, and I do assist the Education Professional Standards Board in the processing and prosecution of the educator disciplinary casework. So I was asked to speak with you all today about the process by which we process these cases, as well as some of the statutes and regulations that inform our work. So the first slide very basic, is just what is the EPSB? And Meredith did a great job of going over all of that. But basically, the EPSB is statutorily mandated to set the standards and requirements for obtaining and maintaining a teaching certificate. And you'll see that I'm citing a lot of statutes. So I am an attorney, so my slides aren't as pretty as Meredith's. I do have a picture on slide number 6, so hopefully that would give you a break from all of the verbiage up here. But you'll see that our statutes are very prescriptive, right? So they tell us exactly what we need to do. And you'll see that in 161.028, it describes the membership of the board. And most members are active educators, right? So the idea is that the EPSB is the mechanism by which educators govern themselves. So it is a peer review process. Okay, next slide. And the disciplinary authority of the EPSB derives from 161.120. And again, the statute's very prescriptive. It says that we can take action against a certificate for any misconduct described in 161.120 or the Professional Code of Ethics, which is promulgated in regulation in 16 KAR 1020. And also the statute tells us very specifically that the EPSB's case process is wholly independent of the district's disciplinary proceedings and any tribunal process, right? So that happens at the district level. The employment decisions are independent from the EPSB's prosecution and decision on cases. Next slide. So again, the statute's very prescriptive, and it tells everyone what the board can do. What types of action can the board take? Well, the statute says revocation, which is a permanent forfeiture of a teaching license. Suspension is a temporary lapse in a license up to 2 years. Refusing to issue or renew, so that would be a denial. So someone's coming into the profession and they show that they have, let's say, a lengthy history of some criminal conduct. The board may decide that they do want to deny that application. Back to that one. Imposing probationary and supervisory conditions upon. This allows the board, in certain cases, let's say there's allegations of substance abuse use. The board can then put in a probationary condition to say, hey, we'd like you to get a substance abuse assessment. We would like you to show that you are complying with ongoing treatment recommendations so we can make sure that you are safe to be in a classroom around children. The board can also issue a written reprimand or an admonishment. This is basically a written warning. Admonishment is defined in the statute as a violation that's not serious in nature. So this is a warning. And the statute also tells us that we can do any combination of those sanctions. So sometimes we may do a suspension with training recommendations, substance abuse assessment, as well as a probation. Next slide. The purpose. So the purpose of the disciplinary work is really written out in our regulation in 16 KAR 1030. And you'll see that there's this balance. So the first part is to ensure that the educator has an understanding of their professional duties and responsibilities. And that's where you have this rehabilitative, restorative piece, that if there are gaps in the educator's knowledge, we want to be able to fill those gaps. And then you're also balancing that against this other need, which is to protect students, parents, school personnel, or school officials. So we're always balancing those two big needs. All right, next slide. And you may ask, well, how do we get cases come to us? We don't just randomly draw from a hat and say, oh, we're going to investigate this district. No, it comes to us from superintendent complaints. So superintendents are mandated to report, again, under our statute, very prescriptive. Right there, that citation, it says the superintendents have to report certain things, right? So if there's a termination, a suspension, a non-renewal for cause, or there's this catch-all that they reasonably believe that the conduct could lead to a violation, that they have to report those to us. So that is the vast majority of our cases come in as superintendent complaints. We also do receive complaints from private citizens, from parents, for the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. They may have substantiated child abuse on a certain educator, so they will send that information to us. We also oftentimes get complaints from the Office of Education Accountability, and their mandate is to basically investigate district-wide misconduct, and so sometimes they will send us their reports and their findings. We do not accept anonymous complaints, unlike some other agencies. We don't do that. Next slide. So here's my picture, the flow chart. So this flow chart was derived from our statute, which again is very prescriptive. So it tells us each step that has to be taken when we receive a complaint. And it gives us very specific timelines. So you'll see at the top, we get a complaint come in, has to be certified as a complete complaint. So the superintendent will say, this is everything I have in my possession at this time. I'm certifying it's complete. Send it to us. Within 30 days, we then have to do that initial review, right? Is there sufficient credible evidence for this complaint to proceed? And then it goes to the next step, right? And at that step, it may be that there's not sufficient credible evidence for the case to proceed, and then there's no case, right? The process stops there. But you'll see then it goes through another complaint review. The educator is given the opportunity, of course, to submit a rebuttal to provide their side of the story. They are also able to attend a resolution conference where they get to meet with myself or one of the other EPSB attorneys and talk about the case, share information, and talk about any potential resolution that we may be able to recommend to the board when they see the case. And you'll see there at the end, that's how the case will flow to the board. And then we have those 7 different outcomes. When the board sees the case, they can then vote one of those 7 tracks for the case to proceed. All right. Next slide, please. All right. And so this just kind of highlights those green bubbles, the different tracks that the board can take. From dismissal. Conditional dismissal upon completion of training is an offer to, hey, looks like you may need some classroom management training. Take that within the next 6 months, and if you do, we will bring it back to the board with a recommendation of a dismissal. Admonish, I had already explained. Further investigation is when the board would like more information, because again, we're just receiving the information from the district, the information from the educator if they choose to submit a rebuttal, and then there may be further questions that we would like to investigate. There may be further documentation or witnesses that we would like to talk to. So the board would vote for further investigation. Initiate a hearing is when we bring back a case with a charging document. And that document outlines what we believe to be, from our witness interviews and investigation, a statement of the facts, as well as an outline of the different violations of the Code of Ethics and 161-120. And then accept recommended agreed resolution is those agreements that we're able to come to sometimes with educators and or their attorneys during these resolution conferences. And defer is, let's say there's a pending criminal case, we want some more information, we're going to push that to the next meeting or 6 months down the road to obtain that new information. So next slide. So this talks about what happens when the board votes to initiate a hearing. So oftentimes we will hear that the process takes a long time. So I think it's important to know that once charges are filed, most often the Attorney General's office is then involved in that they provide the hearing officers for our cases, for our administrative cases. And so once it's at the Attorney General's office with a hearing officer, the hearing officer really is the individual that dictates the timelines of the hearing. If an educator decides that they would like to continue the case, the hearing officer will generally continue it as a matter of course. The hearing officers oftentimes will issue discovery orders. So discovery is when each party asks the other for evidence, and that can oftentimes be a very lengthy process. And also hearing officers may take months to issue a recommended order after a hearing. Or to respond to a motion or set a pre-hearing conference. So there is another agency that is involved in the prosecution of these cases. And of course, during this process, this is a full due process hearing, right? So KRS 13B, this is another statute that I haven't talked about, but this one outlines those basic due process protections anytime there's an administrative hearing with certain agencies. So it's not just for the EPSB, right? This could be for other state agencies that also have to do hearings. These are the rules, right, that happen. And of course, There's a seminal due process case, U.S. Supreme Court, Goldberg v. Kelly. If you do any sort of government admin work, you know. And the premise of that case is that during the pendency of a hearing, the benefit that the government has bestowed to you cannot be taken away, right? So when these cases are pending, there's no action that has been taken on the certificate, right? So as it's a pending matter, there's not going to be a revocation on the certificate or a suspension on the certificate, right? Because they have a property interest in that certificate until the full due process hearing has played out, a recommended order comes out, a final order comes out, and then the judgment comes out. Right. And the last slide here is, again, the prescriptive nature of our statute and regs, right? We have 16 KAR 030, and it talks about the 6 factors that the board is required to consider when evaluating the reasonableness of the sanctions in any particular case. And so it's a weighing of all of these factors, right? The seriousness of the violation, whether there was an attempt to conceal, right? Did this individual come forward and express remorse, or did they try to cover up the misconduct? Does this person have a pattern, right? Are there prior violations? Has this person been before the EPSB 2 times before, and maybe they were first given a written warning, or then they were given some training, and now here we are again. Another one is whether training is appropriate to prevent further violations. Is this a lower level thing when we talk about these rehabilitative, restorative approaches? Is this something where the individual needs some training, right? There's some gaps in the knowledge that we can hopefully guide them to fill. Whether the sanction is necessary to deter future violations in those serious cases, and other relevant facts and circumstances. I'm happy to answer any questions, as I'm sure Meredith is as well. So thank you so much for having me.
And one thing that I do want to point out that I failed to note on our org chart, you may have observed that Nora's team is not listed on that org chart. That is because they are not in the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness. All of the attorneys at the department are in the Office of Legal Services under Deputy Commissioner Allen's leadership. So that is why, although there are EPSB attorneys that you heard Nora reference, there are members of her team that specifically work on EPSB matters. They are all in the Office of Legal Services, not in OELE. So I wanted to clarify that. All right, now is the question portion of our presentation. So happy to entertain any questions you may have.
So one of the important functions is to make sure the pipeline to the workforce is properly supported by standards that that EPSB is responsible for and exercised largely through accreditation. Are all of the teacher preparation programs properly accredited? This is kind of that higher ed culture orientation to collegiate-based professional studies, if you will. So I want to know where we stand relative to that standard of quality. And the second half of my question is, how are we ever going to enrich and advance the clinical pipeline, the clinical training preparation of the education workforce without a more substantial collaboration between K-12 and higher education?
So to answer your first question, so in order to be a qualifying educator preparation program that can make a recommendation for certification, that institution, that EPP does have to be accredited. And there's 3 possible accreditation options that are currently approved by EPSB. So they can have CAPE, which was previously the only accreditor, national accreditor that we had. Recently, well, it's not been too recently, it's been in the past several years, AQEP was added as an option. And then there is a third option for a state-only accreditation. But there is a requirement that all EPPs be accredited in order to, at the collegiate level, issue certificates. We do have alternative pathways that can result in a certification, and the accreditation requirements within those programs are different, right? But when we're talking about a collegiate pathway, those programs are accredited. As far as challenging innovation within the EPP space. That is something that I am sure the Standards Board members have thought of previously and have discussed. Happy to call on anyone who may want to speak to that, like Dr. Murphy.
Not. Lou's here too. But I guess I'm the member. Sure, I'm happy to speak to it. So, of course, we have this regulatory and statutory obligations related
Corinne
to...
Murphy, Dean of the College of Education, Western Kentucky University.
Thank you, Lou. I'm so sorry. Yes. And currently the only representative at this table for EPSB for colleges. Sorry. Right. So we do have a minimum number of clinical hours. Within that, there's also certain components of those clinical hours that have to be addressed, types of classrooms related to certification areas, but so too the supervision. So there's a partnership expectation and requirement within those regulations around the district, the school district, and the university, the partnership, and who is identified as a district-based supervisor and who is required as or identified as an educator provider, an EPP supervisor. So those have two different sets of expectations in how they are selected, how often they can do it, how many students they can have. And so there's some basic check marks that you can go through and actually look at. But then there's also some non-checkmark based indicators of excellence within the clinical training space. And that has to do with our community or an organizational advisory boards that advise each of the education preparation programs. So each education preparation program does include school districts, community constituents, a variety of other individuals on organizational boards that review and are participating in both the accreditation process, but then the non-accreditation process that helps programs know whether they're engaging in best practice or not. I can speak from Western Kentucky University's perspective, where our faculty are actually in the classrooms with our students who are learning to become teachers. And we do that actually at the principal level as well. We partner with districts on co-teaching models where district faculty and district leaders are also faculty members within our programs. And so there's a mixed method to how we ensure that there's a richness to that clinical that matches what today's teachers need. And I think that's really the true importance of the partnership between universities and school districts, is making sure that our classrooms of today are represented and reflected within that program of study. And so that concept is also interwoven into the accreditation process and the program review process, no matter whether you're the state only or whether you are part of the AQEP or CAPE pipeline for accreditation. So I hope that answers your question to a certain extent.
Well, it does.
Happy to take you on some tours as well.
Chair, I got a follow-up to that.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Okay, so, you know, that's been my primary question from the last 4 years, okay? And had this conversation with Dr. Thompson multiple times when he was in charge of ESP, is that through our department here, when we look at, we're responsible for literacy and numeracy support. For example, the 2 legislative practices that came out. There's a huge disconnect from what we are saying over here at KDE with the legislature when we're doing assessment for literacy and numeracy in the early grades versus what teachers are being taught at some universities, not all, but at some, and there's a mismatch, but it's not being corrected. How do we correct that so that we're aligned that what we're saying is best practices is also what is being best practices at the university level for their accreditation?
That's a fair question. May I?
You may.
Okay,
Thank
I didn't know. Can we go back to a few slides of the organizational structure of KDE? Yes, okay, here.
Oh, no, I
Actually,
think
to the
back one.
people.
Yeah,
the
back one
people
more.
one with the names where I can see.
There you
Okay.
go.
So under education preparation branch, where you see Melissa Diebel and her team. So Melissa Diebel runs a fair number of the literacy and numeracy partnership programs with education, with the universities to ensure that what you're exactly talking about is incorporated into our educator prep programs. So those teams think through what are the practice exams that are reflective of those pedagogical practices and content knowledge that are necessary for literacy and numeracy. And so the programs themselves have to submit syllabi, they have to demonstrate within clinical practices where numeracy and literacy are being taught, how they're being taught, how there's also an entire team that's working on HQIR and making sure that the HQIR that's happening for our schools is also reflected into our educator preparation programs. And so those meetings are happening continually. And I think probably one of the things that might be helpful for KBE is to maybe learn a little bit more about that and what are some of those conversations and how universities are actually involved in that discussion because that's exactly where all of that happens. Melissa would know more about, or maybe.
So we know that with Read to Succeed and with numeracy counts, there were in those statutorily mandated expectations, there were some directives to our elementary schools and within our in-service teacher space, but there were also expectations placed on our post-secondary institutions. And so what Dr. Murphy is referencing, there was an expectation within Read to Succeed that there be a praxis assessment that was approved by EPSB that would capture that early literacy knowledge within those grade bands that were named within that particular bill. And so as part of that work, Dr. Diebel pulled together representatives from the different EPPs who were literacy experts to talk about what the recommendation was going to be to the board as to what praxis exam would most appropriately capture that knowledge. But we didn't want to just satisfy that requirement. We also wanted to engage in conversation about what was happening at the programs, within those programs, what are some of the curricular changes that were taking place. And there was an expectation as well that we evaluate those programmatic changes. And so as part of that, we have been in a multi-year evaluation process with a vendor to evaluate all of the EPP's implementation of those literacy requirements. And so we have sort of a before snapshot where the syllabi and the courses were evaluated from 23-24, and then we're going to be reviewing the 25-26 curricula to see if that sort of revision to those expectations within early literacy have been captured in all of our programs. Somewhat similar within the numeracy, although not as prescriptive, there was an expectation for some changes at the EPP level, as well as an observation protocol that the board will actually be entertaining at their upcoming meeting, a recommendation from that work group that was specific to numeracy around a tool. As I mentioned, we have a lot of field experience hours. Kentucky has more field experience hours than most states as an expectation for our traditionally certified educators. And so as part of that field experience, there is a requirement that they have an observation that is specific to their early numeracy instruction. And so that small work group is going to make a recommendation to EPSB to approve that observation protocol. And that will be a uniform expectation across all of our EPPs. We know that there's inherent autonomy within our post-secondary spaces that is distinct from how we think about kind of the P12 setting, right? There isn't sort of this expectation that we can sort of impose on all of our schools as we do kind of in some situations. There's a lot more flexibility in the post-secondary space, and we want that to be the case. We want them to have that intellectual freedom. So all of our programs are different, but there are common expectations. Certainly alignment and preparation around the Kentucky academic standards, those field experience hours that I referenced, and then specific to literacy and numeracy, Dr. Poe, there is expectations around what they talk about and what they don't learn about as well. That has come out recently too. There's prohibitions on certain content around some of the instructional techniques that are no longer considered best practices.
So I really do appreciate the conversation so much, and many thanks to our partners that are here at the table. I think I just wanted to make a comment, really not a question, but while we have Dr. Ellis here, Council for Post-Secondary Education, our partners from the Education Professional Standards Board and the members of Kentucky Board of Education. I just feel like this is a unique opportunity, looking at this kind of mothership of talent right here in the state boardroom, to capture that question that you cast, Dr. Robinson, which is how might we collaborate to ensure that our priorities, resources, time, and talent begin to galvanize around this educator workforce challenge that we are facing in Kentucky. And we're not unique to the U.S. in that situation, but how do we bring back the love and respect for teaching as a profession? How do we find partners in our school districts and other associations? But how might we be very intentional about the way we work together as kind of that triumvirate of folks who we can't parse out what CPE does, to Randy's question. We can't always parse out what EPSB does. We certainly can't, there are Venn diagrams abounding in the way that we go about the work, but I think we lose things in that overlap because we aren't intentional about it. So I think that's a little bit of soapboxing for me, pardon me, but did want to just get the chance to say this is a moment in time that is really quite special.
So I may call on Dr. Ellis to provide some clarity, because I think you brought up a really important point. So there is something unique to the authority that EPSB has around program review and approval that is separate from how CPE typically operates programs. Right. And so the Education Professional Standards Board does have full approval authority over those programs that result in teacher certification, so those educator preparation programs. So that initial program review that is overseen by Dr. Diebel's team, as well as those continued program reviews that occur every 7 years as required in state law, that all happens within our office, comes to the board for approval, and then goes to CPE, and they have sort of...
But then think about that Venn diagram with Educators Rising and dual credit, and where's EPSB in that? Where's CPE in that?
And so,
yeah, I mean,
Dr. Ellis might be able to sort of,
adds to
we
the
have
complexity.
This exciting opportunity where we have a lot more influence in that space than what maybe typically happens. So.
Yeah, so is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're right, Lou. And so what Meredith was talking about is the only two programs that we don't approve initially at CPE is teacher education, if it is a teacher certification. If it's non-teacher certification, it comes directly to us, and nursing. But I feel like in education, especially with dual credit, early post-secondary opportunities, the student organizations, all of that we're very supportive of. And that has played a huge part in my role in the last 5 years of reconnecting K-12 and higher ed in those transition spaces for students to be able to see that they fit, that they belong, that they're worthy, and that there are a lot of pathways. And two areas that I feel like we've probably dug into the most so far has been healthcare and education, which is interesting because we don't approve their programs first, especially with the nursing piece. But I think that the only way we can do that is through collaboration, because the student going through the journey, regardless of the age, doesn't know about all of our acronyms and personally doesn't care, right? So we've got to have common messaging for our citizens to say, yes, you can, yes, we need you, and this is why. And so I think our messaging and our belief statements around the importance of education and educators, which is why we still have it as a priority even in the continuum, because our members have all said from preschool all the way through workforce, if we don't have a strong teacher workforce, we're not going to have a strong future workforce, right? So we've got to have the right people to equip our future. And so we are very much in alignment and on board and in our lane, to definitely support this, which is why I'm here on behalf of Dr. Thompson. He'll be here tomorrow. And so we are very much engaged with that, and not to be siloed, and to listen to our institutions, talk with them, but not overstep, because we know Dr. Diebel is doing a lot of that work. So it's just staying connected. And I would say we stay just as connected to our private institutions, especially the ed prep programs. They're great partners. So we're all trying to accomplish the same things. So I appreciate your statement. And you're right, Meredith, like there's some definite overlap on things, but I hope that we can see the bigger picture and have some common messaging regardless of what acronym goes with our agency or our board, but that we have a true vision for Kentucky. Our kids are counting on it. you know, and so we have work to do. And I think that's the privilege of the board of the EPSB. First of all, having the privilege of being able to speak to it, and you have practitioners speaking to the work and the policy. And I think I tell Cassie this all the time. I think I'm the longest standing proxy. I was a proxy for Dr. Thompson. I've been a proxy all the way back to Dr. Holliday. And they laugh at me because they're like, "Yeah, you're really old on this board." But I can tell you, it's only gotten better over time. When I first started, it was not well organized, and it was a struggle to be timely. And in the wait, and our process behind closed doors of what we have to do is so well done. Nora is an excellent leader. The attorneys are excellent. And so really this board takes on the role willingly of some long hours, and we meet because of legislation change. We meet about every 3 weeks, and it's not always how we get, sanctions. It's how do we uplift the education field? How do we maintain the integrity of our profession, my profession, my title as teacher? That's really important to us. And how do we sell that to others to say, this is not a backup plan. This is your plan, and the benefits of that. And I think we all have to speak to that in a way where people see differences. And I think they also need to see there are lots of pathways in education. And actually the Commissioner Student Advisory a couple years ago said, how did you get your job? You're at KDE, how'd you get here? I was like, that's a really good question. And so he said, you only talk to us about being a teacher, which is good, but there are a lot of people in education doing lots of different things. What else does education offer? We don't talk about it. And so I think we sell ourselves short when we have the opportunity to be in front of the future every day. And so anyway, so that's my 2 cents on it, and I could not agree more. Lou, I think it is a time, and I think we have the right leaders in the place to advocate and to speak proudly, honestly, for educators in our system. So.
You're here.
May I?
Oh, this is your meeting. We are here.
Well, because I'm trying to knit it all together. And I'm wondering if our strategic opportunities may rest with perhaps exploring an advocacy agenda on behalf of the profession. Because let me tell you, right now, there are dozens of students all across the state and the country who do not see teaching as a viable career consideration. Now, have we discouraged our recruits? I celebrate Go Teach. I celebrate Educators Rising as real wonderful initiatives, but they're not going to be the source. They're not going to produce the workforce that we need. So, if we were to think about what that would look like to establish education as a real profession in the state of Kentucky, what would we do? And I think I want to admit to you, I'm struggling because something ain't working. And we talk about what we have to do before us and make that work. But I think we got to find the leverage points so that the efforts that we do right in front of us are fueling effort someplace else that gets us to the finish line. Because what KBE has to do, what EPSB has to do, what CPE has to do, alone is not going to get it done. We talk about vibrant learning experiences, but I was an old English teacher. Where do I learn vibrant teaching skills? In the class I took on classic literature, and I read Chaucer with abandon. I loved it. But when it came time to teach the 11th graders American literature, all my love of the content wasn't going to get it done unless I knew how to do that, how to create a vibrant learning experience out of a Steinbeck short story. So are we looking at where that happens? Who's responsible for making sure it happens? I don't know. I haven't looked at accreditation standards in a long, long time. And I know it can't happen unless the folks who teach the content are also training me to expect vibrant learning experiences. And I can't remember a whole lot of them when I was in college, except driven by my passion for the content. We can't, teaching is more than that. Teaching is helping the students find a way to have passion for the content and finding a way to connect with them. And I know, we struggle with pedagogy, and I'm going to stop spouting off, but I mean, are we looking for an advocacy agenda so that we can have a profession that portrays all that that professional work of teaching is? Is that the way to look at this? Because I guess I'm getting a little impatient. I want to see us find a way to work together to actually, make all the independent parts have more power. On behalf of teachers in the state of Kentucky, I mean, we're still coming off an era where the agenda was to vilify teachers. And then we had the pandemic, and folks had to kind of tap that down because all of us were trying to figure it out. So the volume on that went down, but it could come up again in a heartbeat. And I don't think we have a whole lot of time to figure it out, so let's hurry up and find the leverage points for a collaboration that really does help us open the pipeline to the education workforce based on a profession, the work that you guys do, all that that means, and tell us what to do to help. What's our role in that? We got to find the path.
So I would view today's meeting as phase one of a multi-phase plan. And so we did have an opportunity for our chairs and vice chairs to come together. And I know that was referenced in each of your meetings previously, that meeting occurred. And that was sort of what led to this overview today. But what we would like to propose is another opportunity for both boards to come together, but in a more informal work session where you can come together, talk about your goals and priorities, be in smaller groups, and really dig in. As Dr. Robinson mentioned, there's a lot to discuss. And so that is something we hope to put into place in the near future. I believe we're going to try to have our chairs and vice chairs come together again to sort of think through the proposed agenda for that meeting. But that is something that is a priority for us should both boards be interested in moving in that direction.
Is that where we will get to ask specific technical questions and so forth then? Or when do we do that? It's been 3 years since legislative change has come in the legislature to us as a KDE, for me sitting on this board. So how many more years of legislation are we going to get shoved down our throat because we're not making changes? That's our major concern. We had literacy started, numeracy, and then we had to push queuing out the door because of the legislature. And, we're looking at a K-3 system and accountability, a 310 system and accountability, and we're not getting there. I just don't want to be another 2 years sitting at this table. That's all I got to say.
So how can we get started and how soon? I think there's a sense of urgency because I'm going to tell you, we get any more legislating practice, we are seeing another erosion in the foundation of what a profession is. Now, I'm not saying, other professions are experiencing the same thing, so we're not all by ourselves. But I do think as we get ready to go into this next session, we have a
Yeah, but it's also more than just recruitment of teachers. I mean, that is a critical issue, don't get me wrong. I mean, we've been faced with that for a long time. But the other issue is we've got legislation out there about other practices that we do that are shifting, that's asked whether that's a KBE issue or an ESP from our legislators. And we got to get that worked out too. So those are points. I know you guys may have had your meeting, and I guess I thought we might be discussing those things today with their joint thing. But those are things that would be on my agenda to make sure we include.
If we could go to the next slide, that might be helpful. So I do want to just reiterate that there are distinct responsibilities for each board. And so at the bottom of the slide, and I believe that you have a copy of the slide deck, I did hyperlink those references at the bottom. So the Title 16 regulations very clearly lays out the responsibilities that reside with the Education Professional Standards Board. And so that educator preparation, so the actual review of educator programs, the accreditation process that we support, that squarely lies with the Professional Standards Board. Same as those items I spoke about with the Board of Education. I think what Dr. Robinson is sort of speaking to is in that overlap, where can we advocate for some of these more holistic changes that could have a more substantial impact on the profession. Now, whenever there is a question as to where the authority resides, Todd G. Allen is very good at determining who has the right authority. So that we can always address that when that comes up, because if it falls under, on either side of that diagram, then we can give a very clear answer. I think the challenge, as was sort of alluded to, there's a lot of overlap in sort of the work priorities and the focus areas for each of these different organizations. And so that's where it gets, everyone has a stake in the game. So everyone wants to be in on the conversation. So, but as far as, if something is directed by the General Assembly to us, it will likely be tied to the authority that resides within one of those agencies.
Correct, but I guess, part of this discussion led to the, whatever we call the revenue that we're looking at tomorrow. And there are initiatives that we spend millions of dollars on, but then they're not, on post-secondary, they're not doing the things. So the key critical element is advocacy, coming together, and how do we advocate for the resources to make these things happen when we're not necessarily aligned together to the same point.
Okay.
And to me, we're voting on issues tomorrow, or
Additional budget requests.
the ARP process and
ABR.
so forth, ABRs.
So
And that's an issue that when I'm voting on something and I'm saying resources for numeracy and literacy, but if that's not changing at the post-secondary level, why am I advocating for that?
Correct.
Because we're spending millions of dollars over here in the department on training, but hasn't been carried out. I mean, that's those larger questions than recruitment.
So the additional budget requests that we brought forward were on, that I brought to you a few months ago, were on behalf of our office. And so everything that fell under that request structure would be programmatic support or sort of extensions of existing work that is overseen by the Kentucky Department of Education and the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness, no different than any other office that is under Dr. Fletcher's leadership. I think the challenge that you're describing is that we don't have as much, so we have authority to, as I said, review the accreditation expectations and support that process, program review. But again, those are sort of baseline foundational expectations that are kind of universally applied to all of our programs, but there's still going to be unique elements, right? And so if you're talking about sort of not capturing the literacy instruction at every institution, it could be, we have our minimum expectations and our, here's what you have to have, but that doesn't mean that there may not be some distinct experiences that maybe are best practices or not that are occurring, right? And so we can't really regulate within like every institution is going to have the exact same program. So I don't know if that's what you're kind of talking about, like it's not being done. If you could give me a little bit more information, I could maybe speak to.
Well, I mean,
some
just
of your
like, for example, queuing. For 2-3 years, we've been battling with the science of reading, with letters.
Right.
But yet, the post-secondaries have not implemented that across the board. And then last year, we had this department, the Kentucky Department of Education advocating that queuing should not be utilized, so that's fine. But why are our universities still teaching a queuing mechanism?
So 3 queuing is an excellent example, Dr. Poe, of where we were able to come in and say, as part of the overall expectations in Read to Succeed, there were very explicit instructional best practices that were named. And we had to ensure that the curricula at all of our EPPs were updated to align with those expectations.
Which
to
included a
prepare.
prohibition on queuing.
Correct. Actually, I don't know if that, I'm not sure that there was the full, Holly could probably, it wasn't really, it was almost like indirectly, like if you were doing the things that you needed to do, you would not be doing 3 queuing. There was some conversation this last session to prohibit it explicitly, but I don't believe that passed. But you couldn't have 3 queuing in your curriculum and still satisfy the requirements. Yep.
Each university has to demonstrate that they are using direct instructional methods when it comes to reading.
Literacy.
And whether you want to, we have in the Commonwealth at the K-12 level recognized letters as the named program that uses that same direct instruction to teach everything from phonemic awareness all the way through comprehension. Several universities, including WKU, have wholeheartedly embraced that and implemented that within their curriculum. Other universities have said that is recognized as direct instruction. There are several mechanisms in which we can use, but that is all part of Dr. Diebel's and that review process work. So that is actively happening.
Yeah.
I can tell you that the universities themselves are as frustrated by the legislative moments as many members of this board likely are. But they have wholeheartedly said, we have to keep teaching, we have to keep prepping students to be teachers in our schools, and our schools have the following expectations. Therefore, our programs must make sure that our students, our graduates, are prepared to engage in that environment. And so, does that solve the last 10 years, 20 years of 3 queuing throughout the system? No. But are those processes in place that are holding us to those expectations?
Changing it.
Yes.
So I
Okay,
think
let
an
me
important way.
ask, I
You
just
can,
want to
absolutely, yes.
illustrate, let's take that another step. We've had this legislative intervention on literacy and numeracy. It's got us doing things differently at every level, including, I would dare say, the pedagogy and the content of educator preparation. What do we have? Let me go to the bottom line. I would love to see our regional university systems have a research agenda on numeracy and literacy that requires us to be collecting an organized portfolio of data across the state, recognizing our different conditions, our different kids, our different challenges to practice, so that we have the documentation to go to the legislature 4 years hence and say, this is what you need to fund, either more of this or more of that, because it comes from our voice, our authority. That's representing a profession based on knowledge of the impact of our work. And that's what I want the profession in Kentucky to be all about. So, I mean, we're doing what we're doing to keep up with the challenges, whether it comes from the General Assembly or from Washington or from some local initiative. But I want to know what we're doing to guide ourselves to get stronger. And, you know, an advocacy agenda and a research agenda, I'd go to, I mean, it sounds like that's what we need. Otherwise, I feel like we're going to become pawns in some political agenda that keeps us always on defense, so we don't have any energy for offense.
Well, and as a follow-up question, I mean, that's on our agenda tomorrow, which is the shifting of the national literacy to U of L that was at UK and dumping the other things. But I got a lot of questions on that tomorrow too. I'm sorry, but I do. I read the agenda, you know, and so forth that there's questions from the National what's it called? The National Council or something.
Teacher quality.
Teacher quality.
NCTQ.
Okay. And then tomorrow we're going to be discussing literacy and the center that KBE, I guess, was responsible for hiring the people for the center. And there's some questions on there when you go to their center on some of the people that have been hired from KDE on this same topic that we're going to discuss tomorrow. So I agree with everything you just said. That's the key why it's so critical, because I testified over 15 years ago on the science of reading, and we did 10 to 13 years of unsuccess with the Literacy Center before. And we're going to have that topic tomorrow. And that's the problem. We keep, because of time or whatever, we keep pushing that out. But literacy and numeracy is our number one thing that we got to get right here. And we're not getting it right, people.
So I do want to just sort of, and Dr. Ellis, I apologize. I want to
That's my
sort
last
of
question, Jim.
do wrap up this one point, and the Venn diagram will surprisingly be helpful here again. So I think if you look at, ignore the words that are in there, pretend it's blank, but if we have institution A in the blue and institution B in the green, the part that we are overseeing of their program review would be the overlapping section in the middle, right? And so what needs to be in the middle there when we're talking about literacy specifically are those expectations that are required, either because of alignment to the Kentucky academic standards, the expectations around their accreditation, the statutory requirements that were built out in Read to Succeed, for example, a variety of different things. So that is where we're looking at, but there can still be those unique elements. And so I think that is important to note that we're not going to have kind of cookie cutter programs that are all the same. So different programs may have different experiences for their teachers, and that's okay. And so you may hear, well, we did this at our institution, and that doesn't mean that it's inherently not a good program. So there are going to be those, so that's important to sort of distinguish. But I think the other part that I want to make sure, just on behalf of our EPPs, the changes to their literacy instruction efforts was not in direct response to being mandated to do so. That was already happening in our programs. So they were being responsive to best practices, just like all good professors are. So they were already making those changes, and that is captured in our evaluation that we had. We have our first round that was completed by that third-party evaluator, which is required that we have that evaluation. There are some institutions that, without the enforcement of any statutory mandate, have already started to make those changes. Holly is a professor at one of our institutions and can speak specifically to the literacy work that's happening at her college. But I think it is important that we are proactive and that we are not always in this reactive posture. But I think it is important to acknowledge that this push towards creating a school environment that is better suited to this next generation of students is top of mind for all parties. I believe in talking with our post-secondary partners, they are very aware that there needs to be a shift in the preparation of teachers because there are going to be demands placed upon them that are different than they were 20 years ago. So I do want to say that it isn't that they're always compelled to make these changes. It is because they are being professionally responsive. So I don't know, Holly, if there's anything else.
Yeah, thank you. I just know in my own situation, like we have made lots of changes, we're being very responsive to what teachers are doing in the classroom. We meet routinely with the superintendents in our area, getting feedback about our teachers being prepared and those kinds of things. So.
Yeah, but you're rated very highly. We have several universities here that are failing on that list. So that's where I see it as incumbent upon whoever to make those that's not successful. You're all rated, and you're rated very high. But there's other schools that's rated very low.
And it depends on the metrics that we're using to rate them. So that's another part that I think is a complicating factor. But I think my reason to talk about the distinction between sort of requirements and that flexibility, it's just important to realize that in talking anecdotally to graduates, they may say, well, we did this, and that doesn't mean that that wasn't allowed to happen, right? So there's this sort of, there's going to be sort of unique experiences for our teachers, but the point is that there's a common thread of quality, and that is what our job is to ensure that happens.
I just had a super quick note as one of the resident math teachers up at this table. I got to give a little love to the numeracy side of things because we talked a lot about literacy here. I know so many of our math education professors across the state the Kentucky Center of Mathematics, PIMSR, Advanced Kentucky, all incredible organizations doing really transformative, great things. So I know both incoming teachers, current teachers who've been teaching old school math ways for 20, 25 years are really getting great access from really amazing partners we have throughout the state. So I just wanted to give a lovely shout out to them.
And they are active participants in our numeracy work group. So we
Yes.
have representation there, and absolutely. And I think that the coordination of all of these efforts is to the benefit of everyone. I'm not discounting that, but I just think that it is important to clarify that we don't have the authority to dictate and prescribe every single element that happens. And so that's just a little important clarification.
My name is Lisa Rudzinski. I'm an assistant principal with Fayette County, and I represent school administrators on this board, and I also represented teachers before that. And where I think, I've loved this discussion, but I also think that we have to remember that once those students graduate from those programs, their learning does not end. And then that learning shifts to us as the practitioners to make sure that we are pairing them with mentors who are doing best practices, that we are educating our building leaders on those emerging instructional designs. And as a board, lots of our discussions, because of the representation that we have from so many areas, is, we talk about that. We talk about EPPs, but we equally talk about what's happening when they are actually in-service teachers, especially when some type of violation comes before us. We look at the ethical decision-making that they made. We talk a lot about KTIP and the mentorship program and the fact that we are trying to open up education to more people pursuing it as a career. And as a result, that pipeline gets really big and we have to meet people where they are. And putting people in our classrooms while we are creating the pipeline for our students who are going to go on to post-secondary education is equally important to us. And I think that often gets missed. When we talk about what we're doing at the EPPs, we have to remember that there are partners out here in buildings who are equally ready to and willing to make sure that we are doing what we need to do for those teachers, to make sure we don't pair them with a 20-year veteran who is still doing the old practices, to make sure that we are educating those old veterans with 20 years of experience to what's new as well. And I think that piece sometimes is missing when we have mandates and when we fund things. It happens at the post-secondary level, but then when we are expected to enact that out there in the field, we don't have the resources that we need to do that effectively as well. Or we haven't educated our building leaders effectively enough to be able to support that work down into the classrooms.
I was going to say the exact same thing, Lisa, that if you think about our population, and Sharon, I'm thinking about this rally around teachers, is that our largest teacher population is working. They're working, right? And so the EPPs definitely have responsibility, and they have a couple thousand. We have thousands in the classroom. And so, Lisa, to your point, I am very much, we talk a lot about mentoring. We miss that. We miss not all the paperwork of the KTIP and all the things that people didn't love, but the true triage of adults who poured into those new teachers and new administrators. I was one of the last KPIPs, and people poured into me. And so that's why I'm still in education. I didn't leave it because people invested, just like you all have invested. I've invested. And so I think we have to think about retention, because if you have a recruitment problem, you have a retention problem. And so that gets back to me when it sticks out to that Impact Kentucky Working Conditions Survey. Is it perfect? No. Is it a heck of a thermometer? We need to listen. We need to listen to what the teachers are saying. And most of the time, professional learning is not high on the list, or time, or their voice. And so I think that we cannot just put all of our eggs in one basket on who may want to come into the profession, but how do we retain those who are in the profession, who are wearing out? Maybe we haven't invested in them, or maybe we haven't really given them an opportunity to learn. And I would say the same for administrators. Just because you walk in as an administrator does not mean you know it all. I think it's the most humbling position you could work, and you learn constantly. And so, Lisa, you took exactly the words, because it's an all and instead of just recruitment in. And we know that this generation's not staying. They're not going to stay for 30 years. They're going to stay for 3 to 5. And so how do we really look at it differently, even with the folks we have in the buildings? How do we get them to want to stay? How do we improve our environments and our cultures to hear and see people and make it really about that learning. Because the other thing, Randy, I think that sticks out to me is the math and the literacy are absolutely essential and people are working at it, but we have a whole lot of external things going on too that are causing a lot of distraction. And I think that's where we have to reinvest in our leaders and reinvest in those who are in the classroom to really equip them to meet the needs that are there while partnering with EPPs, because we can't have people pipelining in without basic knowledge to at least start. But it's our responsibility to carry them through and build them and grow them. And I think we've been in triage for a really long time, and we've forgotten what it means to invest in our people and in their capacity. So,
And Chair
I'm
Robinson, I
sorry,
feel like
Sharon.
you're going to be wrapping us up pretty quickly. We're going to get the gong, but
we really
yesterday-
lost control.
Right. Yesterday, Commissioner Fletcher and others presented at the Interim Joint Committee on Education, and Chair West was really clear in casting an agenda for us to be considering around principal professional learning. So there was a whole section on the agenda yesterday devoted to that. And so again, one of those things, if we're taking stock of the landscape of the work that we could do together with some, strategic priority work and intentionality, I think we need to be sure we include educational leaders on that list as well.
We're here because there was a sense of we need to come together and find a way to work, really find the leverage points and get it rolling. So I promise, I don't know exactly how that's going to operationalize.
But we're doing it.
But we got the commissioner and dedicated to this, and I'm going to ask him to, just kind of help us come to a close for this session, because we are way past dinner time. And I know what that means, but with the fervent commitment to bringing us back together for perhaps a more, I'm not going to say more productive, I'm going to say for further work together.
And one of the things that Amanda and Lou both I wanted to kind of emphasize is the role of an administrator as an instructional leader, to me, is the most important role. So how do we handle that with our principals, with our assistant principals and things of that nature? So I think that's very important. But two, that's the need for the work sessions that we're looking at moving forward. There's been so many thoughts around this table that over the past 10 years, I thought, well, that's a good idea, but we're bringing that to the table now. So to have those informal work sessions where we can sit down and talk openly with each other to say, this is where we are now. This is a beautiful point in time with all of us at this table. If you look around the table at the experience, whether it be in the community or as we at the, in our backgrounds that we have, I think this is a great time for us to make sure that, one, we're aligning our conversations, we're talking about the advocacy that we want to do together, and then let's move forward and be more proactive. And I think we have that opportunity now. This was the first start in being proactive. Having those, hopefully in the very near future, after our chairs and vice chairs meet, of what's next. What's next? And I look forward to the small groups where we put everybody in this room into small groups and start having conversations of what's next on our agenda. Again, going back to everything from making sure that we're building instructional leaders, making sure that we're building teachers that are ready for the science of reading, that are already there and expanding that, making sure that we have teachers that are ready for vibrant learning and being able to teach in that method and make sure that it aligns. So the conversations that are going on here today just excite me about the conversations that we're going to have in the future, because there's so much power when we put the groups together, where it's CPE, EPSB, and also KBE and KDE, for that matter, as we move forward. So I think that we're at a good point, and I could listen to this conversation all day. But with that being said, that makes us excited for that next step. And again, getting our voices unified, one direction, moving forward, I think is so important. So I really appreciate the conversation. Start getting out those notepads now and be ready for the next meeting. So thank you so much for that.
All right, at this time, I need a motion for EPSB to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn. The motion before EPSB is to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. EPSB is now adjourned.
I'd like a motion from KBE.
So moved.
regarding agenda. Is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of KBE adjourning now, please, members, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Dinner is ready.